Final Fantasy XIV starts with your character arriving in one of Eorzea's 3 city-states of Gridania, Limsa-Lominsa, or Ul'dah. Depending on where you start, your journey will be different, but they all lead you to the same point, where you find out that you're a warrior of light, one of Hydaelyn's chosen ones. After this, you're recruited to join the Scions of the Seventh Dawn at the Waking Sands, a group that is dedicated to protecting Eorzea against all threats, which include godlike beings called Primals and the Garlean Empire. In your first conversation with this group, you learn that the visions you've been getting are called the Echo, a power that Hydaelyn has given you, and that the leader of the Scions, Minfilia, has the Echo as well. The Echo allows you to see other people's past, and after getting this information, you join the Scions. Finally being introduced to your comrades Yida, Papalymo, Thancred, Y'shtola, and Urianger, and last but not least, the bookkeeper of the Scions, Tataru. After this, you team up with Thancred to stop the Amalja that are trying to summon Ifrit, but unfortunately you're too late. But through this encounter with Ifrit, you find out that you can't be tempered, which is a fancy way of saying mind controlled due to Hydaelyn's blessing. So you fight Ifrit and you win, but you have no time to rest because the Grand Companies of Eorzea want you to join one of them. So you go to the 3 city-states listening to their leaders' speeches to see which one you want to join. But at each speech, you meet a pair of twins named Alphinaud and Alisaie who seem to have issues with all 3 nations, seeking to help Eorzea in their own ways. After this, you choose your Grand Company and are sent on another mission. This time you help Papalymo and Yida oversee the 12's Woods to approach the Sylphs diplomatically to stop the threat of summoning Ramuh, and everything seems to be going well with the Sylphs until we get the news that their leader Phrixio is stuck within the 1,000 miles of Toto Rock. As you look for him, you encounter a man in a dark cloak and red mask named Lahabrea who sends a monster to attack you. After that, you find Phrixio, and with that, it seems like peace between the Sylphs and Gridania is guaranteed. So with that being wrapped up, you head back to the Waking Sands, where you mention Lahabrea to Minfilia, and she calls him an Ascian, but they don't have time to discuss that. Unfortunately, Limsa-Lominsa is asking for help with the kobolds because they're trying to summon their lord Titan. So you and Y'shtola head off to deal with that threat. After defeating Titan, you arrive at the Waking Sands after Livia Sanjunis and her Garlean soldiers have killed and kidnapped most of your companions. After receiving the message of Norixia, you go to the church of Damata Lenmata. This is where you meet Alphinaud properly, and he has a plan to restore the Scions. But first, we have to defeat Garuda, one of the most savage primals that we know of. So Alphinaud recruits Cid Garland, the greatest engineer currently alive, and his airship, so we head to Corphus to find the airship and help people there like Lord Haurchefant. After defeating Garuda, Gaius Van Belsar arrives and uses the ultimate weapon to defeat and absorb the primals Ifrit, Titan, and Garuda. After your failure against Garuda, you turn your attention to saving the remaining Scions, but just before you can escape, you get cornered on a cliff where you get saved by Yida, Y'shtola, and Cid's amazing flying. After this, Lahabrea revealed that he is working with the Garleans and that he's taking over Thancred's body, because the Ascians are beings of pure aether, meaning that they can change their vessels at will. After this, the nations of Gridania, Ul'dah, and Limsa-Lominsa, with the help of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, declare war on the Garlean Empire, meaning that the Eorzean alliance is back in action. They began their offensive by taking out Richtehen Sans Arena to slow down the garrison. Then you defeat Livia Sanjunis because she is blocking the way towards the Praetorium, which is where Belsar is. After getting in, you face Nero, but he escapes, leaving Belsar alone. After defeating Belsar for the second time, Lahabrea forces the ultimate weapon to use Ultima, destroying the Praetorium, leaving you and Belsar alone for your final confrontation. After this, you finally conquer Belsar and destroy the ultimate weapon, but Lahabrea can't accept that, so he tries to fight you himself, but with the help of Hydaelyn, you exorcise Lahabrea from Thancred's body and escape Praetorium before it blows up. After this, the Eorzean alliance celebrates in honor of their victory, but you are interrupted by the awakening of a new primal. But before you confront this primal, you help Cid at the excavation site of the Crystal Tower, where you make a new friend named Grahatia, and Nero reappears. They eventually discover that the tower and everything within it is ancient Allegan technology, meaning that it's far more advanced than current technology. But as they explore the tower, they unleash Xandi, a former Allegan king, and the Cloud of Darkness, an extremely powerful being that wants to consume all of the light within the world and reduce it to nothing due to a covenant that she made with the former Allegan king Xandi. So you defeat the Cloud of Darkness, but we still have to seal away the tower due to the technology being far too advanced for current times. And this is where they discovered that G'rahatia is a descendant of Xandi, and that means that he can't control the tower. So after some time to himself, G'rahatia decides to seal away the tower with himself inside, putting himself in stasis, hoping that one day when the doors open once again, that the Crystal Tower's technology can be understood and used for good. And with that, you say goodbye to G'rahatia. So you return to the Scions, where they are considering moving their headquarters to a more neutral location. But Minfilia is hesitant due to some personal matters. So you and Alphinaud help Minfilia with this personal matter, and they make plans to move to Revenant's Toll, calling their new home the Rising Stones. But soon after, a primal is summoned in Gridania, King Moggle Mog XII, leading to the revelation that historical figures or concepts that are prayed to or revealed enough can be summoned like normal primals, and Ascians are teaching people how to do this. But King Mog isn't a match for you, and you take him down easily. So you go back to the Waking Sands to report to Minfilia just after she's been attacked by an Ascian in a white robe. So you follow him, finding out that his name is Elidibus, but you put that aside for right now because everyone goes to the Rising Stones for the first time, and just when the Scions are getting settled, they have a group of Doman refugees who need their help. They're led by a woman named Ugiri. So after getting acquainted with them, Alphinaud sets up a meeting so she can plead her case to the Sultana and the Syndicate, which doesn't go so well. So the Scions decide to help them for the time being by getting them jobs in Revenant's Toll. But our heroes get no rest because the Sahagin are trying to summon Leviathan. So the Scions plus Ugiri go to Limsa Lominsa, and while there were some struggles, the Scions found a way to defeat the Sea Serpent, and Melvib promises to send supplies to aid the Doman refugees for Ugiri's help in settling the matter and teaching the people of Limsa Lominsa her martial arts. Then the Scions find out that Teleji Adeleji, who is a part of the Syndicate, is trying to take over the Cartanu Flats so he can get Omega, an Allegan weapon that is stronger than the ultimate weapon. But before you can tackle this threat head on, you go to Gridania to slay Ramuh in a test of strength, and he deems you worthy, so the crisis is averted. After this, you go back to the Rising Stones because Urianger believes that he has found a way to destroy the Ascians permanently, which involves trapping them in an ethereal prison and destroying the prison with a massive amount of aether. But unfortunately, they don't have anything that can trap the Ascians, so he does more research. After this, Alphinaud, inspired by you and the Scions, begins to make his own grand company for the continent of Eorzea. So you go around Eorzea recruiting people that you've met on your journey and some brand new faces as well, while Alphinaud deals with the politics of funding by dealing with the Syndicate. But Nanamo the Sultana is worried about the Syndicate using this new grand company as their personal army, but Raban trusts the Scions to oversee this conflict properly. Next, you head to Camp Dragonhead in Corfus to help Hashafan deal with the heretics led by Lady Iceheart. But unfortunately, we can't find her, so Hashafan hands off the investigation to the Order of Holy Knights, who are the military force of the most northern nation in Eorzea, Ishgard. So we go back to the Rising Stones to see Alphinaud's inaugural speech to his grand company, the Crystal Braves. So after this, you assist the captain of the Crystal Braves, Ilbert, with a couple of jobs, which leads you and Alphinaud back to Corfus so you can meet with the leader of the Temple Knights, Sir Emmerich. Unfortunately, Alphinaud can't convince them to join the Eorzean alliance, but Emmerich promises to make sure that Camp Dragonhead can continue to send supplies to the Scions if the Scions check on the Keeper of the Lake's recent activity, so they agree. But just as the meeting concludes, the heretics attack another caravan, so we go after them because it seems like they're trying to summon Saint Shiva, and this is where you meet Lady Iceheart, who tells you that her real name is Giselle, who says that she simply wants to end the war between the dragons and Ishgard. Then she uses an aetheryte to leave. So we wrap things up in Camp Dragonhead by finding the people who told the heretics about the caravan, and then we make our way to Gridania for an emergency meeting with the Eorzean Alliance, because Garlemald has a new emperor, Varus Sos Galvus, the grandson of the former emperor. So for the time being, the Alliance will forget about Cartanu with Teleji Adeleji for now to deal with this threat, so they prepare for war. After this meeting, you head back to Revenant's Toll to meet Monbrita, Urianje's childhood friend. She's going to help the Scions figure out how to capture the Ascians so they can destroy them. She starts by helping the Scions track down Ysel, and you find her just as she transforms into Shiva. After a tough battle, Ysel escapes to fight another day, calling you a fool and asking you to think about why you fight, revealing that she has the Echo as well. But after this encounter, you head to the Rising Stones where Monbrita has made a breakthrough in capturing the Ascians. She believes that White Orsite can be a prison for the Ascians, but only for a short time, meaning that when the Scions trap an Ascian that they have to kill them quickly and have a massive amount of Aether to do it. So everyone goes to do their research. Meanwhile, Ilberd, Alphanode, and Raban discuss the betrayal of Raban's second in command, finding out that she was a triple agent for Raban, Varus, and the Monitoress, the political faction that opposes the Sultana. Later, Nanamo confides that she wants to make Uldar a republic, meaning that she would give up her crown, surprising Melvib and Khan Sienna, and she asks them to help Raban in the chaos that will come afterwards. But moving back to our character, Ishgard requests that we check on Midgar Psalm because the dragon star is shining brightly, meaning that the keeper of the lake is roaring and may wake up soon. And you go to check on his corpse and he's awake, so you fight him, but after this battle he takes away Hydalin's blessing, meaning that you've lost access to the Echo and your resistance from tempering. He is also interested in you, so he decides to travel with you to see what path you'll take and to see if you're worthy of Hydalin's blessing. So going back to the Rising Stones, you help Monbrita create a weapon capable of destroying the Ascians by getting a corrupted crystal. But while you gather them, you're attacked by an Ascian who tells you that he's going to take Tipsamadi, a staff that holds a ridiculous amount of Aether. So you and Monbrita head back to the Rising Stones, but the Ascian kidnaps Minfilia, jumping into a dimensional rift, and Monbrita is severely injured. So you go after the Ascian to get Minfilia and the staff, and after defeating the Ascian, you trap him within the White Orisite. But Tupsamadi and Monbrita's weapon don't have enough energy to take him down, so Monbrita sacrifices herself to give them the push that they need. And with that, an Ascian is defeated and a comrade is lost. Everyone grieves, especially Urianger, but life must go on. So Ishgard requests the help of the Scions and the Crystal Braves in defending the city against the dragons. Leading up to the battle, you have a meeting with Emmerich and you meet Estinian, who is the Azure Dragoon, who usually holds the Eye of Nidhogg, which makes him extremely powerful, but is locked in a vault due to the severity of the attack, and they can't let Nidhogg get back to full power. So you and the Crystal Braves help Ishgard repel the dragons. After this, the Scions are invited to a celebration in Uldar in honor of Ishgard's victory, hoping that this could lead towards a united Eorzea. You arrive at the banquet, getting a glimpse of what Eorzea could be. Then you have a private conversation with Nanamo, and she asks you to support her decision to make Uldar a republic, and you promise to. So with that, she takes a sip of her wine, but it is poisoned, and you're framed for it. While Alphanode has been betrayed by the Crystal Braves, you're dragged to the ballroom where Teleji Adeleji tries to convince everyone that you've poisoned the Sultana, but fortunately nobody believes this. Also, he reveals that some of the other Monitorists have been using the Crystal Braves as their personal army. So at this point, Teleji makes Raban so mad that he cuts him in half, and then goes after Lolorito, but gets his arm cut off by Ilberd, where he reveals that he's been working for the Monitorists the whole time so that he can help Alamigo. At this point, all chaos has broken loose, so Consiena and Melvib leave because there's nothing that they can do. After this, Raban frees you and tells you to clear the Scion's name, so Raban fights alone. At this point, the Scions have to fight their way out of the city. Unfortunately, you're the only one to make it out, with the others staying behind. until we see Alpha Node being escorted by Raban's adopted son Pippin. He helps you and Alpha Node meet up with Cid, and then he flies you two to Camp Dragonhead. So Haurchefant welcomes you until he can secure your asylum in Ishgard. So we go to meet our comrades that escaped, Tartaru and Ugiri. Ugiri stays so she can keep an eye on the situation and help clear the names of the Scions, while Tartaru stays with you and Alpha Node waiting for asylum. Heavensward starts with you, Alpha Node, and Tartaru entering Ishgard as wards of House 4 Temps. Then we meet the person housing them, Count Edmont, and his sons Arturiel and Emilian. After these introductions, you help Count Edmont's sons with their duties to start repaying him for his hospitality. So you start with Arturiel in the Corvus Western Highlands. You two get wrapped up in a mystery that leads you to your cell, but she is surprised that Midgardsorm is traveling with you and explains that all she wants to do is bring peace between Ishgard and the dragons, so you let her leave. After this, you head towards the Sea of Clouds to help Emilian. As you do your duties, you get into a confrontation with the Vanu, saving Emilian, but you end up retreating when they summon a primal, Bismarck. So considering the size of the beast, you retreat, but you are cornered with Haurchefant and Emilian at your side. But Cid saves the day with his airship and you get back to Ishgard in one piece. Upon returning, Edmond tells you that your actions have earned his house a lot of honor, but before you can celebrate, Alpha Node and Tartaru have been detained on suspicion of heresy, but you save them by having a trial by combat proving your innocence. After this, Archbishop Thordan VII wants to meet you and apologize in person, but Thordan also explains that he's met the Ascians and is trying to gain their trust to figure out what they want. He asks for your help when the time is right and you agree. After that, you go back to Lord Edmont's house to discuss things with Alpha Node, but Tartaru interrupts, informing us that Raban is going to be executed. So you and Alpha Node go back to Dandelion to save him, finding out that the false charges against the Scions have been suppressed by Gridania and Limsa Lominsa. So you two plus Ugiri rescue Raban. After this, you four go to the Waking Sands to meet Urianger and Pippin, but before any heartfelt words can be exchanged, we're interrupted by Dulala, a member of the Syndicate, who reveals that the Sultana is alive and that the poison she drank put her into a coma-like state. But she doesn't know where Nanamo is being held, so in the meantime, Raban will recuperate at the Waking Sands. With that being settled, you and Alpha Node head back to Ishgard to try and convince Ysel to stop Nidhogg from assaulting Ishgard again, and Estinian joins you. So after getting permission from Emmerich, this trio meets Ysel, but she tells us why talk is futile, explaining that when the Elysian came to Corvus looking for a home, they were met by the dragons and a war started. However, the tale of love between Saint Shiva and Racefelger spread through both groups, so they made peace with each other, creating a utopia that lasted for 200 years until a group of Elysian knights led by the original King Thordan became jealous of the dragons' long lifespans and decided to take their source of power, their eyes. After this, Estinian tells the group that he can feel Nidhogg's emotions through the eye he holds, and that he has lost all reason, so Alpha Node recommends that they seek an audience with Racefelger, so Ysel leads them to the Dravanian Forelands. As we do that, your connection to Hydaelyn starts growing again. Next, we're introduced to Vidofnir, who we need to open the way towards Som Au, but she is busy with the Nath that have summoned their god Ravana, so you and Ysel deal with him. After this, the path to Som Au is open, but before we can talk to Racefelger, we have to do some tasks for the Mughals living there in the churning mist. After this, we receive a horn that will summon Racefelger. In our conversation with him, he scolds Ysel for thinking that she is Shiva's reincarnation and that what she transforms into is just an idea of what people thought Shiva was. Then he explains that Ysel told the truth about the history that led to this war, but adds that his and Nidhogg's sister was killed in the process, and that her eyes were consumed, meaning that every Isgardian has some dragon blood in their veins, meaning that if they join Nidhogg, they can become dragons. And lastly, he tells our group to leave him alone. Then he leaves. After this conversation, Ysel is broken, so you, Alpha Node, and Estinian leave her behind to confront Nidhogg. But you and Alpha Node have to make a detour in Dandelion to help Raban rescue Nanamo. After we arrive, we find Nanamo in the palace and Raban gives her the antidote. Then Lolorito lets us know that the Garleans Thordens are working on a new massive airship that will wreak destruction upon Eorzea when completed. Once all of this business is concluded, Alphinaud informs you that he is officially disbanding the Crystal Braves, realizing that he was trying to take a shortcut to unite Eorzea. So you both head back to Ishgard so you can team up with Estinian to destroy Nidhogg. You and Estinian travel to the Eyrie, and Estinian lands the final blow on the dragon, taking his other eye. You see a vision of Nidhogg's battle with King Thordan and his 12 knights where he lost both of his eyes. And we also find out that every Isgardian is a descendant of these people, meaning that someone gave Nidhogg an eye to save his life, and that person was Hraesvelgr. After talking to him, he doesn't apologize for his actions and tells us to leave, but our trio has no time to rest because the heretics are attacking Ishgard. Luckily we arrive in time so Ysel can calm down her people. After the city has calmed down, you, Haurchefant, and Estinian go back to House for Temps. Emmerich is there and plans to confront the Archbishop on the true history of Ishgard. In the meantime, you, Alphinaud, and Tataru ask Hilda the Mongrel for help in case you need to save Emmerich from the Archbishop. But before she can agree, you're attacked by one of the Heavensward, and after that skirmish you are informed that Emmerich has been imprisoned. So Lucia will save Emmerich and you will look for the Archbishop. You eventually find him, but he's getting away on an airship with the Heavensward. Emmerich, as his son, begs him to tell everyone the truth, but unfortunately Thordan VII doesn't want Ishgard to change, believing that everything that they have built up until now will be for nothing. So as you and Haurchefant try to catch the ship, one of the Heavensward attempts to snipe you, but Haurchefant blocks the blow and dies in the process. After grieving, everyone figures out that the Heavensward and Thordan VII are looking for Azizla, so you're informed that Thordan's airship was seen by scouts in the Sea of Clouds, and you ask Cid to take you there. This is where you meet a friendly Vanu tribe who tells you that Bismarck has the key to Azizla in his stomach, so Cid finds a way for you to fight the primal and you defeat it, but you're ambushed by Thordan and an Ascian taking the key with them. They leave heading towards Azizla. After this you go back to the Vanu tribe, but they're being harassed by the Garlean Emperor Varus and his troops, but Lucia swoops in to save the day, so they retreat to the giant airship that Lolorito mentioned. After this interruption, you've tried to follow Thordan VII to Azizla, but are stopped by a barrier. Cid proposes that we create a ram of condensed aether to pierce the barrier, but we need an expert in the field. Luckily, Tataru has found a lead on one of the Scions' whereabouts, Y'shtola. We find out that she used a spell that threw her into the life stream, and that the only way to find her is to trace her presence from where she cast the spell and to follow the trail. Their search leads them to Gridania, where Consiena and Y'shtola's sister help you bring her back. Y'shtola quickly informs us that she doesn't know how to make a ram out of aether, but her former master Matoya should, so they go to the Dravanian hinterlands to find her. Matoya shares her knowledge on etheric convergence after we find her notes on it in the Great Library. But before we go back to Ishgard, Matoya figures out that Y'shtola is blind and is using her life force to sense the things around her. So we bring the book to Cid and he creates the ram. But before we leave, Urianger gives us a white Urusite, knowing that the Ascians will be on Azizla. So you, Alphinaud, Cid, Estinian, and Y'shtola go to Azizla, but you are attacked by the giant Garlean airship who follows you through the barrier. But Ysel takes down the ship, sacrificing herself in the process, so the group lands on Azizla safely. But as your group continues, they let you go on as they hold off the Garleans that crash landed. Also, Estinian gives you Nidhogg's eye just in case you need it. After this, you and Midgardsorm encounter Tiamat. Tiamat explains that she was captured by the Allegan Empire thousands of years ago and stays on Azizla in exile as self-punishment for allowing the Ascians to resurrect Bahamut by summoning him like a primal, describing this primal as a mockery of what he once was. This talk with Tiamat and Midgardsorm restores your connection to Hydaelyn completely. Seeing this, Midgardsorm Midgardsorm is convinced that you deserve Hydaelyn's blessing and allows you to ride on his back to the final battle. As you fight your way inside, you fight Lahabrea and Aegeorn, and you defeat both of them. After this, you use the White Auracite and Nidhogg's Eye to destroy Aegeorn, and before Lahabrea escapes, Thoradin the Seventh and the Heavensward arrive with the corpse of the original King Thoradin and Nidhogg's other eye. Then the Archbishop transforms into a primal called King Thoradin and then destroys Lahabrea in one hit. After this, you fight King Thoradin and the Heavensward in their primal forms and win. As the Archbishop passes away, he asks, "What are you?" But you don't have time to think about this question because Estinian arrives to take both eyes, but is taken over by Nidhogg's spirit and the dragon is reborn. After this, you head back to Ishgard with your remaining companions. When you arrive, Midgardsorm warns everybody about Nidhogg, telling them if they truly want peace, they will have to face him. Immediately following this, Ishgard joins the Eorzean Alliance as you and your friends begin to restore the Scions to their former glory. But we cut away to see that Elidibus has his Warrior of Darkness that will be facing very soon. After a short rest, we get back into action with Emmerich telling us his plans to contact the dragons and Lucia will act as his envoy, so you introduce her to Vidofnir. The talk goes well, but Vidofnir explains that she needs to consult Hraesvelgr before she agrees to anything. After this, you, Alphinaud, and Y'shtola meet Kryl in New Sharlayan. She is here to help the Scions find Thancred, but she needs Matoya's crystal eye. Kryl tracks him down to the Dravanian Forelands, where we encounter the Warriors of Darkness. They sneak attack us, but Thancred saves the day, so the Warriors of Darkness retreat. Thancred explains what happened after leaving Ul'dah and lets everybody know that he can't use magic anymore. Meanwhile, in Ishgard, Emmerich was stabbed, throwing Ishgard into chaos. Then a mob takes control of the vault with hostages, so Emmerich and the Scions storm the vault, defeating the mob along the way. Unfortunately, one of the priests has taken the child hostage and throws her off the roof, but Vidofnir arrives, saving the child's life. She tells everyone in attendance that Nidhogg is coming, and then she leaves. After this, the Scions start gathering their old allies and looking for Minfilia. Their findings lead them to Master Matoya asking for permission to use the Anti-Tower, a Sharlayan construction that will allow you to look at the ethereal sea. You enter the tower and meet Minfilia. She explains that she became a vessel for Hydaelyn and tells us about the existence of Zodiark. This is the god that the Ascians serve, and she begs you to defeat them. After this, you explain Minfilia's fate to everyone, then you're invited to a ceremony that will be a show of peace between the dragons and Ishgard. So you head towards Falcon's Nest. In the middle of enjoying the festivities, you get poisoned and knocked out. When you wake, chaos has erupted due to a group of people who don't want peace with the dragons. This rebellion is quelled at Emelian's order. After this, we go back to Ishgard to assist them in a joint training exercise against the best forces of Gridania, Limsa-Lominsa, and Ul'dah. After Ishgard's victory, the conference continues with Emmerich giving a speech that convinces everyone to give peace with the dragons a chance, and he caps off the speech with a mural depicting Shiva and Hraesvelgr. But he is interrupted by Nidhogg, who attacks Vidofnir and tells Ishgard to be ready because he is coming. Later on, you and Alphinaud resolve yourselves to save Estinian. After this, Emmerich requested that we help him recruit Hraesvelgr to defend Ishgard, and we agree. So you two and Emmerich talk to Hraesvelgr, with Midgardsorm vouching for you as well. After hearing you plead your case, Hraesvelgr gives each of you a trial to overcome to prove if you can back up your words. You, Alphinaud, and Emmerich pass your trials, allowing Hraesvelgr to trust man once again. After this, you three ride into battle on Dragonback. Hraesvelgr immediately attacks Nidhogg, but is overpowered because he gives you one of his eyes. This allows you to fight Nidhogg on equal footing and you defeat him, but he still has control of Estinian's body, so you and Alphinaud try to rip the eyes away, but you don't have enough strength until Hashafant and Yssel's spirits help you. Then you two throw Nidhogg's eyes into the abyss below you. After a short break, you visit Estinian, who seems to be in good health. He also gives up the mantle of the Azure Dragoon. Then Emmerich is appointed to the highest position in Ishgard's reformed government. Next, you and Emmerich have dinner, but are interrupted by the arrival of Thancred and an injured Alizé. Thancred explains that he's been tracking the Warriors of Darkness and found out that Alizé was doing the same, but she doesn't have the same level of skill well as him when it comes to stealth, so she was caught. So Alizé and Thancred were almost back to Ishgard, where she got shot in the shoulder with a poisoned arrow. But before she is taken to the doctor, she tells everyone that the Warriors of Darkness are making the beast tribes summon primals, and that the Ixo are trying to summon Garuda again, so you and Alpha Node stop it from happening. After this, the Warriors of Darkness show up with a new member. They don't fight you because Elidibus may get angry, but they explain that they come from one of the 13 reflections, and due to their actions, light has consumed their world. So they have come to the source to break down the walls separating their worlds so their home can have balance and go back to normal. But this would kill many people in the process, and after this, they leave. So you two go back to Ishgard and see that Alizé is feeling much better, and after discussing this new information with everyone, you, Alpha Node, and Alizé go to Urianger for advice on what to do next. Urianger lets us know that he's been hearing rumors that Titan may be summoned again, so you head to Camp Overlook to handle the situation. This is where you meet Gabu, a young kobold that asks you to stop his leader from summoning Titan to save his parents. But you don't make it in time. Gabu's parents have already been sacrificed and Titan is summoned. Even though he's stronger than last time, you defeat him again, but Gabu was tempered, but because he isn't violent, Limsa Lominsa will take care of him for the time being. Then the game cuts away where you see the Warrior of Darkness's new companion explain how to save his world faster. After this, you go back to the Waking Sands where Urianger informs you that a large number of crystals have been sent to a resistance group in Little Alamigo, meaning that somebody is trying to summon a primal, so you, Alpha Node, and Alizé investigate. You and Alpha Node catch a speech from the Griffin, the leader of this new resistance group, but you also find Yida and Papalimo. They inform you that they've never met the Griffin and that the person giving the speech was a stand-in, on top of the fact that he doesn't trust the Scions. So after explaining why you're there, Yida and Papalimo get you a meeting with the Griffin's double, hoping that he knows some of the Griffin's real plans. He explains that they won't use them for summoning anything, but will give them to the Amalja in exchange for their help in taking back Alamigo. After this meeting, you call in Thancred to assist you with the Amalja, but the Warriors of Darkness got there first and slaughtered the Amalja. Then they tried to destroy you, but you're saved by Urianger, revealing to everyone that he was working with the Warriors of Darkness as a double agent to help the Scions. After the Warriors of Darkness are defeated, we find out that they are Ascians, so we can't kill them. After this, you use your crystal causing a chain reaction that teleports everyone to Hydaelyn's realm. Urianger asks Hydaelyn if they can speak with Minfilia, and they do. Minfilia decides to go with the Warriors of Darkness to save their world on Hydaelyn's behalf, meaning that this is the last time the Scions will ever see her. But before they leave, the Warrior of Darkness tells you that it doesn't matter if you have the power of light or darkness, just continue doing what's right. Then they leave. After this, all of the Scions reunite at the Rising Stones. They restructure their organization to allow everyone to pursue their own goals and call upon each other when needed, and Cryo officially joins the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. But before we split up, we give Tupsamati to Papalimo, but we cut away to see that the Griffin is working with Elidibus and that they have Nidhogg's eyes. After a short break from their duties, the Scions gather once again to elect a new leader of the group, but before they make a choice, you're interrupted by an Alamigan resistance member, Monago, stumbling through the door. She asks the Scions to stop the Griffin's attack on Belsar's wall, because he wants to start a war on Eorzean land to force the Eorzean Alliance to take back Alamigo. So the Scions split up to tell the Alliance leaders about what's going on. After this, the Scions and the leaders gather in the Twelveswood to have a meeting in Gridania, so they prepare for war and go into battle, because the Griffin disguised his troops in Grand Company uniforms to trick the Garleans into believing that Eorzea is launching an attack on them. After fighting your way through the battle, you find the Griffin, who turns out to be Ilberd, and you defeat him. But before he dies, he sacrifices his comrade and even his own life to summon a primal stronger than Bahamut. To stop the primal's rampage, Papalimo uses Tupsamati to seal the beast before it forms, sacrificing his life in the process. After this, the game cuts away to see a giant man arriving at the Waking Sands, who is found by Urianger. So the Scions, the Alliance leaders, and Cid go back to Gridania after the battle to figure out what to do about the primal. But as they are stumped for an answer, Nero arrives and he suggests that they dig up Omega. After a debate, everyone agrees to wake up Omega, with you, Cid, Nero, Yugiri, and some other scions going on an expedition to get the weapon. But this group makes a detour at the Rising Stones, and the giant man that Urianger found comes in right behind us. His name is Gosetsu, and he has come to get Yugiri at the request of their master. But she explains that she can't leave until she repays her debt to the scions by dealing with Omega. So the group splits up, and you go to the Cartanu Flats with Cid, Nero, Yugiri, and Gosetsu. But when you get there, the Garlean Grinwald and his troops try to stop you. So Cid and Nero go inside to activate Omega, while the rest of you hold the Garleans off. After the skirmish, the rest of you go inside as well, where we activate Omega and let the Primal Papalimo trap and Omega fight. Omega fights the Primal to a draw, with both of them retreating. After this, your group goes back to Gridania to tell the Alliance leaders what happened. At this meeting, they decide to make contact with the Alamegan resistance to take back Garabania and specifically Alamigo, where Yida tells us that her real name is Lise, and she finally takes off her mask. She explains that her father used to be a resistance leader, but they got separated, and she never saw him again. She declares that she will fight for Alamigo's freedom, then Gosetsu and Yugiri leave for Doma. After this, everyone returns to the Rising Stones because the Alliance has requested the Scions' help. They want the Scions to secure the consent of the Alamegan resistance before they start taking Garabania back. After this, Lise leads your group to Ralgar's Reach to talk to a resistance leader, Conrad. He accepts the offer from the Alliance, but explains that he only speaks for the people in Ralgar's Reach. He promises to help convince the other factions and that he needs more people due to the people he lost in Ilbert's sacrifice and morale being low. After this meeting, you, Alizé, and Monago go to Raban. They come up with a plan for the Alliance and Resistance to engage the Garleans in open combat and win, hoping that they will inspire the other Alamegans to try again. After this, you and Lise go to a village looking to recruit people, but the people there have had their spirits broken. This leads you to doing some odd jobs, which brings the group into an encounter with the Skulls and their leader Fordola, a group of Alamegans who work for the Garlean Empire. After this, we cut away to see the Crown Prince Xenos getting tired of waiting and wishes to take the fight to Eorzea, so Fordola gives him a suggestion to attack Ralgar's Reach. So you and some of your comrades are on a scouting mission and the Garleans attack while you're gone, but after seeing the smoke you rush back in. In this conflict, Y'shtola is heavily injured, putting her out of commission for a while. Then you and Xenos fight, but he defeats you. After the attack, you make a plan to fight Xenos on two fronts by splitting his attention between Garabania and Doma. So you, Lise, Alizé, Alphanote, and Tartaru head to Kugane, a city near Doma, where they meet Hancock, who Lolorito sent to help the Scions with whatever they needed, and the first order of business is to find Yugiri and Gosetsu, so you can help the Doman Liberation Front. So they look for a way to cross the Ruby Sea because that's the only way to get to Doma from Kugane, but unfortunately it's controlled by the Confederacy, which makes things complicated. Your search on how to get to the Ruby Sea brings the Scions to encounter a blue Kojin named Soroban. He lets you use his ship, but before you leave Kugane, you hear some rumors of a man who may be Gosetsu, and the rumors are true. After reuniting with the giant man, everyone except for Alphanote and Tartaru goes to the Ruby Sea. This is where you find out the Red Kojin are working with the Garleans, and you meet Yotsuyu, the lady who Xenos left in charge of Doma. After witnessing her cruelty, Gosetsu gives himself up as a hostage, sparing the villagers, and he directs the rest of your group to a tower where the leader of the Confederacy lives. When we get to the tower, Rasho, the leader, explains that they'll only fight the Garleans if there is a sign they could win, so Alizé decides to give them their sign by defeating the Red Kojin. To do this, they need help from the Blue Kojin, and they get blessed by the Kami, allowing you, Alizé, and Lise to breathe underwater to accomplish a task for them. After doing this, the Blue Kojin tells you how to deal with the Red Kojin, and it boils down to defeating Susano, a primal. After defeating their god, the Red Kojin abandon their post, meaning that the Garleans lose their numerical advantage against the Confederacy. So the Confederacy saves Gosetsu and the village he was protecting, plus they regain control of the Ruby Sea. After this, you reunite with Gosetsu and walk into Yanxia, finally making it to Doma. When you enter a village called Namai, the villagers are apprehensive to all of you, some of them even crying because of your arrival. A teenager takes your group to the House of the Fierce, the headquarters of the Doman Liberation Front, and Yugiri is here as well. She tells us that she has found Lord Hien, the rightful ruler of Doma. He is at the Azim Steppe, but she informs us that Hien will only fight the Garleans if the people of Doma want to fight. So it is up to us to rekindle the flames of rebellion. This leads us to rescue the hostages who supported the Confederacy's actions against the Garleans. But when you and Yugiri rescue them, their spirits are completely broken with no will to fight. Even though Yugiri's words sway some of them, they still go home. After this, Xenos arrives in Doma and Yugiri attempts to assassinate him, but she fails. So you team up to fight Xenos, but you lose again. As Xenos is about to kill you, your allies and the villagers you saved come to save you. After this, Xeno goes back to Garabania and you, Lise, and Gosetsu head to the Azim Steppe to meet Lord Hien. He orders Yugiri to return to Yanxia and prepare their forces for his return. The rest of you will help Hien and the Mole win Nadam, a competition between the tribes in the Azim Steppe. This way Hien can bolster his army, because whoever wins Nadam leads the tribes. The Mole allows all of you to join Nadam, but your group has to conquer a trial at Badarm's Metal before they're eligible to participate. After finishing the trial, the Ornir force you to meet their leader, Magni. After forcing you to do a task, Magni allows you to go back to the Mole. After one more night of rest, the Nadam begins the next day. The competition is fierce, but you and your comrades win. You become the Kagan, which means you're the king of the Exo until the next Nadam. Immediately afterward, Grinwald attacks, so everyone teams up to defeat him and his comrades. Next, Hien explains the situation in Doma and the tribes agree to help us. So you head back to Yanxia to carry out Alphinaud's plan with one change from Lord Hien. The Blue Kojin will destroy Doma Castle's support, flooding the palace, forcing Yotsuyu to the top floor, making it easy to find her. So the next day comes and we execute the plan perfectly, until you face Grinwald one last time. After defeating the cyborg, we find Yotsuyu and kill her, but the castle is crumbling, so Gosetsu holds up the roof so we can escape. And with that being finished, the Scions go back to Garabania to help the Alamegan resistance and the Eorzean alliance. But before we leave, Hien promises that he'll help Eorzea by sending troops of his own after Doma's government is established. Next, the game cuts away to see that Cryo has been taken hostage by Xenos. After explaining what happened in Doma, they realize that Garlemald is on the defensive and they will seize the opportunity. Our first task is to capture Castrum Veldona. You take back the Castrum, but there is a report from the Ananta that one of their tribes, the Quiriana, is trying to summon a primal, Siri Lakshmi, because the Quiriana princess was killed in a battle with the Skulls. So your group tries to plead with the Quiriana, but they don't listen to you and they help Siri Lakshmi fight you. After defeating the primal, the game cuts away to see Cryo being experimented on and Fordola has been given an artificial enhancement with an order from Xenos. Now the game moves back to the Scions, Alliance, and the Resistance taking the Watchtower, but the Watchtower and many people on both sides are shot down by the cannon at Castrum Albania under Fordola's command. In this attack, Conrad dies and tells Lise to lead Rauger's Reach in his place. After this, Estinian appears and disables the cannon, giving everyone enough time to storm Castrum Albania. But Alizé gets injured and we find Fordola, but she escapes. After taking Castrum Albania, we start the final push in Garabania, making our way to Alamigo. Raban lays out the plan to take back the city, with the main goals being keeping the civilians safe and finding Xenos. He says that the Scions will be a special unit with saving Cryo as their main goal. The Scions secure a path into the city and Thancred appears to lead them to Cryo, but Fordola is here as well, but we defeat her and take her into custody, in addition to rescuing Cryo. Once we get back to headquarters, the Scions figure out that Fordola has been given an artificial echo and enhanced physical abilities due to her operation, which could explain Xenos' strength as well. After this, you and Alphinaud stop a Garlean squadron of Wolfmen by explaining that Lord Hien is alive and they could go back to Doma, so they promise to help the resistance when the fighting starts in the city. As the Alliance breaks down the doors to the city, Hien arrives with air support. After this, you enter the city and fight Xenos in the throne room and have a draw, but he leads you outside to reveal that he's captured the primal Shinryu and used his version of the artificial echo to fuse with the primal. So you fight the primal that Omega couldn't defeat and you win, separating Xenos in the process. After this, your comrades arrive to arrest Xenos, but he offs himself after finally being satisfied in a fight. After his death, all of the Alamegans join in singing Alamigo's national anthem. After this, we cut away to see that Elidibus is working with Emperor Varus. Then the game moves back to Rauga's Reach, where Lise tells everyone that she's leaving the Scions to serve as the leader of Rauga's Reach, but they promise to stay friends regardless of that. After finishing your adventures, you run into Arenvald, who invites you and Alphinaud to explore the tomb of the Mad King Theodoric, with the hopes of finding his treasure to help the cost of running Alamigo. After this, you three tell Lise what you did, but are interrupted when a riot breaks out because Fordola hasn't been executed. Luckily, Raban steps in and calms the people down. After this, you, Alphinaud, Arenvald, and Lise talk to Fordola. All of you try to convince Fordola to help Alamigo instead of asking for death. None of you make any progress until you and Fordola look into each other's past by using the echo. So you leave Fordola with her thoughts, wondering how you deal with everything that you've been through. After this, you leave your friends to help Nanamo. She wants to let Raban choose if he wants to come back to Ul'dah or serve his homeland Alamigo, so she asks for your help to prove to Raban that he doesn't have to watch over her anymore. This leads to her having a meeting with Lolorito, where she makes a deal with him that will allow the Alamegan refugees to return home and make Ul'dah a lot of money, proving that she can deal with the Monitoress by herself. After this, you and your comrades oversee the first meeting of the various leaders of Giribania, where Lise declares that they don't need a king anymore, and proposes the idea of a republic. The meeting is going well until the Quiljana Queen summons Siri Lakshmi to temper everyone in the room. So you and Arenvald hold off the primal while Raban and Alphinaud protect the leaders, and lastly Lise goes to get help. And just when we can't hold out anymore, Lise brings Fordola to help, so Alphinaud protects the leaders while the rest of you defeat Siri Lakshmi. After this, Fordola goes back to her cell and you talk with Raban. But after you finish talking, Nanamo speaks to Raban, telling him to stay in Giribania and help rebuild his homeland. So with that, the best friends go their separate ways, and the following morning, Raban announces that he's staying in Giribania. So with your business in Alamigo finished, you, Alphinaud, and Alisaie get a request to come to Kugane. Hancock tells everyone that he's been getting reports that people have seen Gosetsu and Yotsuyu around the area. You three join Yugiri to find Gosetsu before the Garleans find him, but when you get to the Ruby Sea, the Garleans are attacking the Confederacy, and this is where you find Gosetsu protecting Yotsuyu. After a small skirmish, Gosetsu explains that they survived the castle collapse, then they drifted to a desert island and Yotsuyu lost her memories. After this explanation, everyone goes to the House of the Fifths to meet Lord Hien for his judgment on Yotsuyu. Hien decides to hide her in the castle for now so no one can see her. After this, you, Yugiri, and Hien meet an ambassador from Garlemald named Asashi, who is Yotsuyu's stepbrother. He explains that he wants to negotiate peace with Doma, and the meeting moves to the Doman Enclave. The main talking points of this conversation is how Garlemald wants to form an alliance against the practice of summoning primals, but Hien asks Asashi how they're supposed to trust each other considering recent events. So Asashi proposes a prisoner exchange for the Domans that Garlemald has captured and the Garleans that Doma has captured, making it clear that Yotsuyu must be a part of the deal. Hien ends the meeting by saying that he needs to consider Asashi's proposal, so in the meantime you and a couple of others show Asashi around Doma until you find the Red Kojin harassing a young boy and his sister. After this fight, your group goes back to the Doman Enclave to witness Hien's decision on what to do with Yotsuyu. He has a conversation with Gosetsu, deciding that if Yotsuyu's memories return by the time of the exchange, she will go to Garlemald, but if her memories don't return, he will allow her to live in Doma. So Hien agrees to the prisoner exchange, but he tells Asashi about his condition with Yotsuyu, and Asashi agrees, but he asks to see his sister before he leaves. After this, he leaves for Garlemald, but before he gets on his ship, he makes it very clear that he hates Doma and you specifically for killing Xenos. After he leaves, you tell everyone what he said so they're not to trust him. Then the game cuts to Asashi meeting with his sister and he gives her a crescent-shaped mirror and we see that Zenos is alive. After this, we save Yotsuyu from a mob at Namai after she went to get fruit for Gosetsu. Yotsuyu is regaining her memories and apologizing for what she's done, even though she doesn't have the full picture yet. After this, we meet with Asashi and his subordinates. He explains that the Doman hostages are on his airship, but before things can proceed, Asashi brings out his parents to jog Yotsuyu's memories, and it does, but Yotsuyu doesn't admit it. After this, everyone has a meeting about everything that has happened. Then at the end of this conversation, a maid tells us that Yotsuyu has disappeared, so we go looking for her. In your search, you find Yotsuyu's step-parents dying. Then you get a vision showing that they're still horrible people by trying to sell Yotsuyu again, but at this point Yotsuyu has all of her memories back and she murders them for revenge. After this, Asashi approaches her, offering her an opportunity to get revenge on Doma itself. After this, Yu, Hien, Alpha Note, and Yugiri meet Asashi on his ship and Yotsuyu reveals herself. Then she transforms into the primal Tsukiyomi, so you fight her while Hien, Alpha Note, and Yugiri look for the prisoners on the ship. After defeating Yotsuyu, Asashi comes in and shoots her, taunting you over the fact that you can't kill him because he's an ambassador. But luckily for everyone, Yotsuyu had enough strength to kill him herself, and after this, she passes away. After this, one of Asashi's subordinates, Maxima, confirms that Zenos is alive, which leads to confusion because Zenos is supposed to be buried near Alamigo. Then they do the prisoner exchange with no issues, but Alpha Note interrupts, asking Maxima if he can go to Garlemald as an ambassador for Doma and investigate Zenos. After this, the Doman prisoners are reunited with their families and Gosetsu tells everyone that he is putting down his sword. He explains that he will go on a journey offering prayers for souls who died suffering. After this, you go back to Girabania and confirm that Zenos' body is gone. Then the game shows us that Zenos' soul is in the Alamigan soldier's body. Next, we cut to a scene where the ship Alpha Note is on is shot down and he is attacked, but he's saved by a mysterious man who has Ascian mask hanging from his belt. After this, you meet Thancred to give you an update on how the Garlean Empire is dealing with other nations after the uprising in Doma, and the Alliance is sending aid to help those smaller nations. But the most important point of this conversation is that an Ascian is using Zenos' body and that Alpha Note never reached Garlemald. So Thancred's information leads you, Alize, Hien, Y'shtola, and Yugiri to investigate the ship's crash site in the burn. The group doesn't find anything useful other than some Allegan ruins, so we go back to Doma where Lise is waiting for us. She tells us that Alamigo has officially joined the Eorzean Alliance and that the leaders of the 5 nations are having a meeting hoping that Hien will join them as well. So Hien accepts the invitation, but he tells Lise to inform the Alliance that he needs to make sure that Doma's defenses are set up before he comes. Hien wants to make an alliance with the eastern nations of Doma, Hingashi, Suinosato, Naxia, and Dalmasca to combat the Ascians and the Garlean Empire. Y'shtola suggests that they use the Allegan ruins at the burn to make an energy field like Azisla so Garlemald can't invade Doma by air. But to power this shield, they need a large amount of energy, so Hien suggests that we use an Allegan ether regulator in the Azim Steppe, but we need the permission of the Dawntrail to use it, so we go and ask them, and they agree, but Sadu, their leader, wants to fight the Warrior of Light in exchange. This fight turns into a giant battle between your group of Hien and Y'shtola, the Dawntrail, and the Ornir. After Sadu is satisfied, your group goes back to the Aether Regulator and Y'shtola connects it to the ruins in the burn. After this, Hien and the Scions join the leaders of the Alliance at the meeting in Alamigo. At this meeting, Thancred proposes that the Alliance use ninjas to infiltrate Garlemald to spread the rumor that Zenos' corpse is being used by a dark presence to create a war of succession and make Garlemald weaker from the inside. But before everyone agrees to the plan, the Scions all double over in pain as they hear a voice in their head asking for their help, but it stops quickly. Afterwards, Thancred passes out. After getting him to a doctor, Consiena explains to the Scions that they were being called, meaning someone was trying to take their souls from their body and take them somewhere else. So the remaining Scions meet Yorianje at the Rising Stones, who explains that he heard the voice too. They discuss the fact that some areas of the world are running low on Aether and that it's stressed strange, but before they can talk anymore, the voice calls them again. This time Y'shtola and Urianger's souls are taken. After she calms down, Alisaie invites you to Limsa to visit Gabu, who is still under the effects of tempering. Then we cut away to see Varus talking to his grandfather Solus Zos Galvus in a young body, and he reveals that he's an Ascian. Then he exclaims that he only created the Empire for the sole purpose of sowing the seeds of chaos to carry out his goal of rejoining. Then the game cuts to a scene where Alphinaud and the people who saved him arrive at their camp, where everyone is dead. The man named Shadowhunter tells Alphinaud that Garlemald has been developing a gas called Black Rose, and if you breathe it in once, you die. Then we go back to the Rising Stones and Cryo is back in action. She recommends that we track the Aether of the Scions that were called, as she did for Thancred. So you, Alisaie, and Cryo go to Master Matoya to use her crystal eye again. Unfortunately, when Cryo tries to track them, she says that their trail just stops, leaving them confused. After this, you and Alisaie go to Garabania to meet Maxima, who came to Alamigo without Alphinaud. He goes over the events I talked about earlier and clarifies that Alphinaud chose to stay in Garlemald to continue his investigation with the Ascian hunters. He also tells everyone that the Empire is planning to invade Alamigo, so Raban plans to open up negotiations with the commander of the army so they can have as much time as possible to set up their defenses. After this, you and Alisaie are called again, but neither of you are taken, so you two go to Doma to update Hien on the current situation. Next, he invites you to see the barrier in the burn activate, and it works with an Imperial ship not getting past. The ship lands with Shadowhunter coming out carrying an unconscious Alphinaud. Shadowhunter tells us that Alphinaud has been called, and you figure out that this man is Gaius Van Belsar. Gaius explains that he wants revenge against the Ascians and explains that the Red Mask Ascians are the strongest, with Elidibus and an Ascian named Emmett Selk being the only ones left that we know about. He believes that Elidibus is currently using Xenos' body. Also, before he leaves, he informs us about the gas called Black Rose and that he destroyed the facility making it, so it will be a while before they can use it. After this, you head to the front lines of Alamigo. You, Alisaie, and the Alliance leaders are invited to talk with Varus before the battle begins. The main point of this meeting is that Varus reveals that he wants to commit wide-scale genocide by helping the Ascians complete the rejoining with the 13 Reflections and returning the world to how it used to be. After this, everyone calls him crazy and the war officially begins. After this, you, Alisaie, Hien, and Ugiri fight your way through waves of enemies and defeat Varus's guards. You take a short rest, but when you and Alisaie are called, she is taken, leaving you and Cryo as the only remaining scions. After getting Alisaie off the field, you head back into battle to fight Elidibus in Xenos' body, but you're called in the middle of your fight and teleported to a place you don't recognize, and you meet the person who's been calling you. He tells you that the battle you're fighting is pointless and that you need to open the gates in the Crystal Tower to get to the first. Then you wake up in Ishgard, where Emmerich explains that you were saved by Estinian when you were called, and that Thancred's plan for Garlemald is working. After leaving Ishgard, you return to the Rising Stones, and Tartaru has returned from Kugane. Then you explain to her what's been happening, so Tartaru theorizes that the other scions must be with the man who called you. So you, Tartaru, and the remaining scions that aren't affected by the calling search the Crystal Tower. Then you wander off and find a device only to be called once again, but this time you let the voice take you, waking up in the forest under harsh sunshine. You run into a traveler who says that it's night, which leaves you confused, but you don't linger on this too long and walk towards the settlement in the distance. However, you are stopped by the captain of the city guard, Lena, who lets you through after the Crystal Exarch, leader of the Crystarium, explains that you're one of his guests. He explains that we are currently in the First and that he called the Scions here to help him save this world, because the First has been consumed by light and only 1/10 of the world is livable. Then he finishes the conversation by saying that the monsters called Sin Eaters are born from the light and that you can save the source by saving the First. Then you continue the conversation inside the Crystal Tower on the First. Here the Crystal Exarch explains that time flows at different paces between the First and the source, meaning that some of the Scions have been here for a long time. But currently time is running at a similar pace between the two worlds, so you shouldn't worry about it. He also tells you that they came to the first as spirits, separate from their bodies, meaning that they have no way back home at the moment, but they're still working to try and stop the dark future Urianger saw. After this, the Crystal Exile gives you a tour of the Crystarium and introduces you to Feoul, a pixie that will act as a gateway to send and get stuff from home. So you make a pact with her. Then you retire to your room for the night, and this is where you meet the Warrior of Darkness, Ardbert, who is confused that you can see him. He explains that Minfilia and his comrades gave up their existence to stop the flood of light, leaving him alone, and then he leaves. So the next day you see the Exarch and he tells you where the Scions are located and recommends that you find one of the twins first due to the ease of getting to their locations. So you go to Colossia to meet Alphinaud. When you meet, he explains that he wants to get into Ulmore, a city where the richest people in the First spend their days in luxury, to gather information and form a plan about how to save the First. As you get closer to the city, he explains that people camp outside of the city, hoping to be chosen to get in based on their talents, and we see an example of this. Also, you notice the mysterious food called Miol. After this, Alphinaud pulls you away, explaining that he has a plan to get in Ulmore. However, Kaishir steals his idea but is caught by you two. So Kaishir explains why he has to get in Ulmore, so Alphinaud takes pity on him and lets him go. So we go back to the camp outside of Ulmore where they're looking for an artist for the Chais, and Alphinaud fulfills this request by explaining that you're his assistant, getting both of you into Ulmore. You meet the Chais fulfilling their request, but your attention is dragged away when you hear a scream, only to find out that it's Kaishir. He's being punished by the mayor of Ulmore, Valfrey, because he entered the city without permission. After arguing with Valfrey on top of finding out that he can control Sin Eaters, you and Alphinaud get Kaishir out of there. Then you go to Amarang to get Alizé, and Alphinaud goes to the Crystarium. During your adventures in Amarang, you meet Tessaline, the head caretaker of the inn for people who've been corrupted by Sin Eaters, and she knows Alizé. After you get to her inn, you find Alizé fighting Sin Eaters, but you don't have time to rest because you, her, and Tessaline have to find Haurik, one of the patients at the inn. Your group finds him, but a Sin Eater is trying to change him into a Sin Eater, and in the process of saving him, Tessaline gets turned into a Sin Eater herself. After this, you and Alizé take Haurik back to the inn and go back to the Crystarium. The Exarch explains that defeating the Light Wardens may cause the lesser Sin Eaters to disappear and get rid of the light all over the First. Then the Exarch explains how rejoining works. As the source was split apart, giving birth to its 13 reflections, none of them were as balanced as the source, meaning that if one of the reflections were filled with too much of one element, that world would be consumed by it, and that extra energy would go back to the source, resulting in a calamity. After his explanation, you, Alizé, Alphinaud, Lena, and the Exarch go to Homner Switch to defeat a Light Warden attacking the village. After defeating the Warden, you absorb the light it contained, bringing night back to Lakeland. After this, the Exarch begins calling you and the Scions the Warriors of Darkness, and you go back to your room in the Crystarium. Then Ardbert reappears, explaining that he's been watching your journey so far and warns you that your journey will cost you something. Then he leaves. Then we cut away to see Estinian and Gaius teaming up in Garlemald to destroy the Black Rose facilities. The game cuts back to you, and the Exarch explains that Ulmore's emissary Ranjit is coming to ask questions about the dead Light Warden. Ranjit says that anyone associated with the Crystarium is found to be responsible for the Light Warden's death, Valfrey will declare war. So the Exarch doesn't admit to helping but makes it very clear that he's happy the Warden is dead. So Ranjit leaves to deliver this message to Valfrey. Then Lena reports that it looks like Ulmore's forces are capturing Minfilia, which leaves the Scions confused. Then the Exarch sends us to the Crystarium library to get an explanation while he's preparing for war. This is where we find out Minfilia has been reincarnating in the First for generations to continue her fight against the Flood of Light. After this, you help the Crystarium fight off Ulmore. The Scion's main goal in this fight is to save Minfilia and to get her out of danger, but you and the Scions are beaten down by Ranjit, then saved by Thancred and the Exarch. Then we escape to Ilmeg, the Fairy Kingdom, the home of Urianger. After we get away from the fighting, Thancred explains that the Exarch gave them two orders: to meet with Urianger and to defeat the Light Warden in Ilmeg. After this, the new Minfilia explains why she ran to Lakeland without telling Thancred and gets scolded. However, our heroes are forced to play with the pixies until Feal-Ul works out a deal so you, Thancred, and Minfilia can see Urianger. Urianger explains his vision in detail, saying that when the Empire unleashed Black Rose, they couldn't stop it and the gas killed far more people than intended, destroying society itself in the process. Also, he informs us that the Light Warden is in the castle within the middle of the lake. After this, Thancred explains that 3 years ago, the old Minfilia took over the current one's body to explain to him that if the new Minfilia wishes to give up and stop fighting, that she'll take over her body in her place, or if the new Minfilia wishes to fight for her own reasons, she'll give her power to the new Minfilia, ending her recycle of reincarnation. Then she leaves, asking Thancred to watch over her until the day she makes her decision. After this, the Scions ask the Pixies to let them enter the castle, and they do after forcing them to play again. Next, the Scions do a couple of tasks for the people of Ilmeg until they're disturbed by the scream of the Pixie King, Titania the Light Warden, and Ranjit with Yulmar's army entering Ilmeg. So you go to defeat Titania while the Scions stall Ranjit, but there's one issue with defeating Titania. Someone must take her items and become the new king. So Feal-Ul steps in to do that so you can continue your journey. Then Feal-Ul fights off Ranjit and the Yulmar soldiers and promises to help if you ask for it. Then the Scions return to the Crystarium only to be encountered by Solus, who reveals that he's the Ascian named Emet-Selch. He explains his frustration that you're messing up his plans and then asks to watch your journey, offering his knowledge and strength in return, explaining that the Scions don't know what his goal is and hopes that they could find some common ground. Then he leaves, promising to see them soon. After this, you go to your room where you talk to Ardbert, where he begs you not to trust Emet-Selch and to not fight blindly. The next morning, the Scions and Exarch meet Emet-Selch in the Crystal Tower, where he reiterates that he meant what he said but realizes that his presence isn't wanted, but continues to watch. The Exarch recommends that we split up to find the locations of the other Light Wardens, so Alphinaud takes Calucia, Alisaie goes to Amarang, and the rest of the Scions go to Ratika Greatwood, Y'shtola's home. Immediately after entering Ratika, the Scions are surrounded by the Knights Blessed, a group of people who live in the Greatwood and are led by Y'shtola, who doesn't recognize you until you talk due to her blindness, and your Aether having so much light due to you absorbing the Light Warden's power. After this encounter, they're brought to the village of the Knights Blessed, Sliverbough. Y'shtola explains that to explore the forest fully, we need to access the other part of the forest, Yxmaya, but it's guarded by a tribe of warriors who refuse to let strangers in, so she and Urianger will try to decipher the tablet the Exarch gave you, believing that it opens a way for everyone to explore Yxmaya. The rest of you explore the city, learning about the Knights Blessed culture and your importance as the Warrior of Darkness. After this, we eavesdrop on Urianger and Y'shtola, who are discussing the effects the Light Warden's power is having on you. But before you can hear any more, the Yulmarans attack Sliverbough. Ranjit demands that the Knight Blessed answer to Yulmar now, and if they don't cooperate in time, they will be considered enemies and exterminated. After this, they discover where the Light Warden is hiding and enter another set of ruins to unlock the path. But Ranjit and an emissary catch up to you and Y'shtola, claiming that he poisoned the Knights Blessed before getting here, claiming that they have the antidote. Unfortunately, in this fight, the floor collapses and the antidote falls in, so Y'shtola sacrifices herself to throw the antidote to you, falling into the pit below. After this, Ranjit gets thrown into the pit as well, then all of you head back to Fanau. Emet-Selch reappears and the Scions discuss Y'shtola's fate and come to the conclusion that she used flow again, so Emet-Selch offers to bring her back, hoping to finally gain the Scions' trust. After this, the Scions head into the Quitana Ravel to destroy the Light Warden. After beating the monster, you absorb its light and bring back the night sky. As the Scions leave the ruins, they stop to look at a mural, and Emet-Selch appears to tell them what the pictures mean. He explains that the Ascians were the original inhabitants of the source, but as the end of days were coming for them, they prayed and sacrificed, creating Zodiark to save them, and he did. But there were some Ascians who didn't believe in Zodiark, and from their fears Hydaelyn was born Reborn to be his equal and opposite. So the two of them fought until Hydaelyn won, striking Zodiac so hard that she split him and the source into 14 pieces. Then he drops the bomb that Hydaelyn and Zodiac are the most powerful primals and that the rejoining is a way to bring back his people. After this, the Scions head back to the Crystarium and go their separate ways. You head back to your room where Albert asked you if you two are just slaves to Hydaelyn's will, after hearing Emmett Selk's explanation, but you don't answer. Then the game cuts away to Estinian and Gaius discussing the possibility of another Ascian being in the Garlemald capital and seeing Xenos spying on them. Then the game goes back to the first where you wake up to the sounds of people scrambling. Then you, Alphinaud, and Alizé help set up a barrier for the Crystarium at the Exarch's request, getting it up before the Sin Eaters arrive. Then you three join the rest of the Scions and the city guard to protect Lakeland. The casualties are heavy, but they manage to fend off the Sin Eaters. After this victory, Valkyrie shouts a message from Eulmore's airships gloating about his victory. Next, the Scions and Emmett Selk meet the Exarch in the Crystal Tower, where they come to the same conclusion, that Valkyrie directly controls Sin Eaters and is the source of this attack. Then Alizé tells everyone that an abandoned mine in western Amarang could be a hiding place for a Light Warden, but it's too big for her to explore alone, so she came back. This is when Minfilia recommends that she goes to the spot where the flood of light was stopped so that she can choose to give the old Minfilia her body or to get the full powers of the Oracle of Light herself. Either way, once her decision is made, they'll be able to track down the Light Warden using her powers. So with this recommendation, the Scions split up, with you, Thancred, Minfilia, and Urianger going to Amarang to get to Naboth Arang, the site where the flood was stopped. But we have to help a rundown village to help us rebuild a Talos, to push a minecart to our destination. After this, you, Thancred, and Minfilia go to Naboth Arang, while Urianger goes to get the other Scions. When your group gets to Naboth Arang, you're attacked by Ranjit, so Thancred holds him off and defeats him, nearly dying in the process. Meanwhile, you and Minfilia go to the exact spot where the flood of light was stopped. After this, the old Minfilia appears and asks the new Minfilia what her choice is. The new Minfilia expresses that she wants to help the people who helped her and that she wants to save this world with her own hands. So the old Minfilia gives up the rest of her power and says goodbye for the final time. After this, Minfilia gets new hair and eye colors. Then we meet with the rest of the Scions and Minfilia gets a new name, and from now on will be called Rain. Then she leads everyone to the mine with the Light Warden inside. After defeating the Light Warden, there was some discomfort when you absorbed this light, but you ignored it for the time being. Later on, the Scions go back to the Crystarium and you talk to Ardbert once again, but in the middle of your conversation, the light overwhelms you again and Ardbert accidentally helps relieve your pain. After this, the Exarch comes to check in on you, and after he leaves, your echo gives you a flashback of a destroyed house for temps with two unknown people having a conversation. After waking up, you head to the Crystal Tower. Everyone agrees that it's time to fight Eulmore and finish this. However, this is where Emmett Selk interrupts and explains the history of the Ascians again, but adds one important detail. Most Ascians and other beings from Emmett Selk's time were split into 14 parts as well, giving birth to everyone we know now. The only three that were spared were Emmett Selk, Elidibus, and La Habrea, and that he doesn't consider anybody other than the Ascians to be truly alive. Except you, he has high hopes for you. After this, we find out that Eulmore is preparing for an attack, so the Scions head to Calusia before they can build their defenses, only to find the people under Valkyrie's mind control. Then Reen sees some Miol and can sense it's made out of Sin Eaters, which explains Valkyrie's mind control over the people of Eulmore. After this, the Scions fight their way through Eulmore, defeating Ranjit for the final time. After this, we confront Valkyrie, and this is where we find out that he's a human Sin Eater hybrid and that he is the Light Warden of Calusia. But he escapes to Mount Gog, raising it into the air before you can fight him. Then Reen reverses the effects of Valkyrie's mind control, but Alphinaud explains that every mean-spirited thing that the rich of Eulmore did to the less fortunate was of their own doing. After this, the citizens of Eulmore offer their help to pursue Valkyrie, and Chai Nuz offers his expertise in Talos to get the lift working again. But afterward, they were faced with another challenge, actually getting to Mount Gog without getting shot down. So we call upon our friends from every corner of the First to help China's build a giant Talos that can grab Mount Gog and give us a path. Then the game cuts to Xenos challenging Elidibus for his body. Then the game goes back to the First. After getting on Mount Gog, the Scions fight their way through waves of Sin Eaters, holding off the weaker ones so you can fight Valkyrie one-on-one. After defeating him, you absorb his light, but it's too much for you and your soul begins to break. But the Crystal Exarch steps in to take your light and jump into the void to save everyone, and at this point you figure out that the Exarch is G'raha Tia. But before G'raha can finish his plan, he's shot in the back by Emet-Selch. He explains that he's disappointed that you couldn't contain the light and explains that if you could've, there would've been some merit in working together, explaining that he would've seen the Scions as something more than a fractured piece of life. Then tells you that you're nearly a Sin Eater now. After this you pass out and Emet-Selch leaves, telling you to find him in the Tempest if you want to become a Sin Eater in peace, and takes G'raha Tia as a hostage. You wake up in your room at the Crystarium and open up the window, seeing that the sky is filled with light once again. Then Ardbert explains that the Scions are looking for a way to save you, so you wander around the Crystarium, eventually getting some encouragement from Ardbert and Feal-Ul. After this you go to the Crystal Tower and get a vision that explains how this G'raha Tia is from an alternate timeline where you didn't stop Black Rose and the world went to chaos. He went back in time to the First by using the Crystal Tower but went back too far, so for 100 years he set things up in the First so his plan would be ready to go once he called you to the First, and extended his lifespan by fusing with the tower. After getting this revelation you try to leave the Crystarium by yourself, but the rest of the Scions promise to stay with you until the very end, accepting that you will most likely die. So our heroes head towards the Great Lake to ask the Fae Bismarck to take them to the depths of the Tempest, but he is too busy sleeping, so you call Feal-Ul, who commands Bismarck to help the Scions. After getting to the bottom of the Tempest, the Scions have to help the Ondo living down there to find Emet-Selch's hideout, and they find an Ascian city called Amarat. As they go through the city, they find out that all of the Ascians and the city itself were just Emet-Selch's creations in honor of the people and home he lost. Your journey in Amarat leads you to talk to Hylodeus, who is aware that he's a creation of Emet-Selch. The main point of your conversation is to find out that nearly half of the Ascians gave up their lives to create Zodiac, and that you and Ardbert used to be a part of the same person. Also lastly, Emet-Selch must have known the original you, but after getting this information, you regroup with the Scions to face Emet-Selch. So the Scions have one last talk with Emet-Selch, explaining that they get where he's coming from, and because of that they will fight for their loved ones as well. So Emet-Selch challenges the Scions, forcing them to fight through a recreation of Amarat's last days. Then he attacks them, knocking out everyone except for you, and at this moment the light overcomes you, but Ardbert steps in, joining with you, allowing your soul to hold the light within you easily, and Emet-Selch sees a flash of the Ascian you used to be, and then you two fight. You end up beating Emet-Selch but can't destroy him until the rest of the Scions step in, using the white auracite they brought along to let you get a finishing blow by using the access light you have. So Emet-Selch accepts his defeat gracefully, asking the Scions to remember that his people once lived, and they agree, so he fades away. After this, the Scions and G'raha Tia return to the Crystarium, having a meeting in the Crystal Tower about how to get the Scions back home without killing G'raha Tia. So you go back to the source alone to give Tataru and Cryo an update on what happened in the First. Then the game cuts back to Garlemald, where we see that Elidibus has run away and Xenos has his body back, on top of killing Varus. The game cuts back to your conversation with Cryo and Tataru. Cryo explains that the link between the Scion's body and souls are weakening, and she doesn't want to find out what happens when the link breaks, so you go back to the First and tell everyone about what Cryo said. After this, G'raha Tia explains how he summoned the Scions to the First, hoping that they can bounce ideas off of each other and figure out a solution. Y'shtola comes up with an idea for you to carry their souls back to the First, and Urianger recommends that they use white auracite to store their souls, and that they just need to test the idea. So G'raha recommends someone someone that may be able to help, and after completing their trial, Beowulf joins you. At the Crystarium, G'raha explains the situation to Beowulf and they agree to help but request for some help with their field work. So you, Alisaie, Alphinaud, and Beowulf go to Amarang to start testing their theory with familiars and to see if they can reverse the effects of the Sin Eater's corruption on the affected. After making a breakthrough, Alisaie points out that the Sin Eater's corruption is similar to tempering from primals and comes to the conclusion that the tempered may be cured. After this, you and Alphinaud go to Calusia to find Chynuz, who disappeared after being elected as the mayor of Yulmore. We find him just as he finds Warden, the former advisor to Yulmore's former mayor. So Chai gives Warden an answer that he can't deny and proves that he is capable enough to lead Yulmore. So after that adventure, you go back to the source to update Tartaru and Cryo once again. At this meeting, you find out that Estinian is taking care of the Scion's business while they're in the First, and informs you about what's happening with the Garlemald Empire and Xenos. Then he takes his leave. After this, the game cuts to someone approaching Xenos who wants to help him find Zodiark. Then the game cuts back to you and Cryo meeting Gaius and Raban. In this meeting, Gaius reveals that the Empire is trying to rebuild the ultimate weapon and that a prototype is on its way to Eorzea. After this, you go back to the First to update everyone about everything you learned. Then G'raha and Beowulf show their progress on making a vessel for the Scion's souls, but state that there is some more work to be done. After this, you and some of the Scions reveal the true history of the Warriors of Light within the First to the people of the Crystarium, so people will remember them fondly. But soon as you finish talking, a man who looks like Ardbert appears, preaching to the crowd of people that they should become the new Warriors of Light. During his speech, the Scions return to the Crystal Tower to discuss things with Beowulf and G'raha, and Y'shtola confirms that Ardbert is still within you, which leads them to one conclusion: Elidibus is posing as Ardbert. After this meeting, Alphinaud follows Elidibus. Urianger leaves to inform Thancred and Rhine of the current situation, and lastly, you and Y'shtola go back to Yxmaya to explore some new ruins that are about the disaster that befell the Ascians, which we don't find. But after exploring the ruins, Y'shtola thinks that if someone possesses the Echo and has been rejoined enough times, that they remember things from their time as an Ascian. After this, you and Y'shtola rendezvous with the rest of the Scions to confront Elidibus. They try to find some common ground with Elidibus, asking him to think about Emet-Selch's last words to them. But this is where Elidibus tells the Scions that he has the same goal as Emet-Selch and that he will not stray from his path. After this, Elidibus leaves. Y'shtola recommends that we explore the Tempest once again to learn more about the world that once was and the Ascians themselves before they fight Elidibus. So the Scions ask Bismarck to take them to the ruins that they want to explore. After fighting their way through Ander, they find a room with giant crystals that held great significance to the Ascians. Then a device within the room projects holograms of a meeting of Ascians discussing the end of days and a defector from the convocation. But these conversations are shut down by an Ascian named Vanat. The Scions figure out that these Ascians summoned Hydaelyn. Then they activate the device again, seeing Vanat talk about becoming Hydaelyn's heart, and she wonders if this is how the convocation felt about Elidibus, meaning that at some point Elidibus became Zodiark's heart, leaving the Scions confused about who they're fighting. After this, Y'shtola stays at Ander to see if she can find out more, so the rest of the Scions head to the Crystarium only to find the place in disarray. Many of the people who work for the Crystarium are resigning because of Elidibus's words, but before the Scions can even process this situation, an illusion of a star shower appears with many people hearing Hydaelyn in their head. Then Elidibus continues his deception by convincing these people that they're warriors of light. Then he tells the Scions that the Echo is a power that everyone could use and that Hydaelyn just helps people activate it. After this, everyone splits up and you go to sleep. Then the game cuts away to Xenos, who is having dreams about the final days, and asks his Ascian companion to tell him about it. The next day you run into Elidibus, who is walking aimlessly, and you get a flashback of him becoming Zodiark's heart. Then you talk to G'raha, who reminisces about his past, but you're interrupted by Reen, who tells you that Thancred collapsed. After talking to him, everyone concludes that the bond between his body and soul is getting weaker, so you go back to the source to check on their bodies and to update Cryo. Then she tells you that their physical conditions are deteriorating deteriorating and that they need to get back home soon. After this, you return to the first and update the Scions on their condition. G'raha and Beolug show off the completed vessels for the Scions' souls and minds, but they still have to do some testing with an extra vessel. So the Scions hunt down Elidibus' minions while you get Y'shtola from Ander. As you arrive, you find Y'shtola unconscious as the bond with her body gets weaker. Then Elidibus talks to you again and you get another vision of his past, which confirms he's lost his memories. Then he kidnaps Y'shtola and makes you fight imitations of your friends and enemies in a gauntlet that leads to him. Then you fight Elidibus, who is still using Arbert's body, and defeat him. Following this, Y'shtola catches up to you and explains that after leaving Zodiac's heart, Elidibus became a primal and that his goal is salvation for the Ascians that prayed to Zodiac, and asks him does he remember why he became Zodiac's heart. Elidibus tells her that that is irrelevant and reveals that he has helped, made, and even become heroes over the years to rejoin the world. While you wait for Y'shtola, you follow and collect a trail of talking crystals that lead you to Hylodeus. He explains that the crystals are fragments of the 14 Convocation members and listens to your explanation of the situation with Elidibus. After listening to what you said, Hydiphilus expresses that he wants you to live. He reasons that you can't keep your promise to Emmett Selk if you're dead, and gives you the last crystal of the 14th, explaining that this one is from the defector that opposed the rest of the Convocation, and it will help you if you wish for it. After this, you and Y'shtola meet the rest of the Scions at Yulmore. However, another star shower appears, summoning misguided heroes from different worlds to attack you. So the Scions fight their way back to Lakeland, but realize that there are too many heroes to stop, so they let you go ahead to the Crystarium to fight Elidibus. Along the way, you find G'raha, who tells you that Elidibus is using the Crystal Tower to summon the heroes, so you and him go to the tower, but G'raha stays inside the tower so you can fight Elidibus one-on-one. You confront Elidibus on his ideals one last time, then he transforms into the Warrior of Light incarnate, attacking you, but the Crystal of Azim, the defector from the Convocation of 14, activates and protects you. Then you and Elidibus battle, with G'raha using the Crystal Tower to deal the final blow. After this, G'raha Tia reaches his limit and the crystal begins to overtake his body, but before that happens, he puts his memories into the extra testing vessel, then he passes away. Following this, the Scions say goodbye to their friends and family that they made in the first, then they enter their vessels and you bring them back home. Then the game skips to a couple of weeks later and it's revealed that you woke up G'raha Tia and gave him the memories of his other self. Then he joins the Scions of the 7th Dawn. Then the game cuts away to Xenos finding out the name of this new Ascian, Fandaniel, and confirming that they're going to start their plan. Then the game goes back to the Scions getting reacquainted with their home. Then Lise comes to the Rising Stones to learn about the Scions' adventures in the first, and to request the presence of the Scions at an Alliance meeting in Alamigo, except for you, Alisaie, and G'raha Tia, because you three are going to continue Alisaie's research into curing tempering. So they go to Azizla because G'raha Tia says that the Alligans were interested in the subject, but they need Cid's help to extract the data from the archive node. So they go back to the Rising Stones where Cid will meet them, and in the meantime find out what happened at the Alliance meeting. Thancred and Urianger will go to Garlemald to get an accurate picture of the chaos happening in the nation, and the Alliance plans to have peace talks with the various beast tribes. After that, Cid arrives and opens the archive node. The research inside reveals enough to give them a breakthrough, so Cid and Nero run simulations on how to cure tempering, which fries their computer system, but they get the answer they needed now that they have their cure. So you, Alisaie, and G'raha Tia go to Limsa to test out this new magic on Gabu and meet Alphinaud and Y'shtola there as well, so they assist. Then they leave the rest to Alisaie, so the others wait until Alisaie comes back with a fully healed Gabu, who is back to normal. So their attention turns to producing as many familiars as possible, so they go to ask Master Matoya. She helps the Scions create a familiar that will create other familiars who can cast the curing spell. Following this, you, Alisaie, Alphinaud, and G'raha go to Limsa to help Melvib get the pirates under control and to get their support in peace talks with the Beastmen. After helping Melvib with the pirates, your group goes to cure a kobold leader of his tempering, which you do. But the meeting seems like a disaster until Gabu speaks up and Melvib admits to Limsa wrongs against the kobolds and convinces the kobold leader to genuinely try making peace. But before they can breathe, a mysterious tower pops up in Vilbrun, and we get reports that towers are sprouting all over the world. So they're directed to Alamigo because the Garleans look like they're going to be making a push on the city. But as soon as you arrive, Fandaniel rides into the city on the back of a dragon he calls Lunar Bahamut, and he wants to recreate the final days with the help of the towers around Eorzea. After a short rest, we pick up with the Scions listening to Thancred's report about what he saw in Garlemald, explaining that the people were in some kind of trance building a tower that channels Aether, and that Raban wants to see the Scions in a meeting in Alamigo. So most of the Scions go. At the meeting, they learn that the scouting parties that were sent to check out the towers came back tempered, chanting glory be to Garlemald, and that the abduction of the beastmen all over Eorzea might have something to do with the towers popping up. After this, Arenvald and Fordola step up to investigate the towers because of their resistance to tempering. Then they leave to start their mission. In the meantime, the Scions split up, with your group going to Ishgard to meet up with Estinian. When we find him, he mentions that he was going to Azizla to see if Tiamat would know anything about Bahamut's resurrection. So they go with him, where Tiamat explains if Bahamut has been summoned, that means that Fandaniel must have dragons of Mercidia under his control. This leads to our heroes convincing Tiamat to help them stop Bahamut and her kids. But she is afraid of meeting Bahamut because she is still tempered by him, so Alizé promises to cure her. So after doing their research on Tiamat and multiple applications of the untempering spell, Alizé frees Tiamat and Alphinaud takes off her shackles. After being freed, she promises to help you in the upcoming battle against Lunar Bahamut. So all of you head to the battlefield where the Amalja are being attacked. You and the Scions fight your way through waves of enemies and you destroy Lunar Bahamut. After this, Tiamat vows that neither her nor her children will ever give the Ascians the time of day again. And by helping the Amalja in their time of need, they promise to have peace talks with Ul'dah. Then we cut away to see Arenvald and Fordola in one of the towers, finding out that the towers are being powered by captured beastmen. But when Arenvald tries to free one of them, he trips the alarm and they're attacked by a lunar Ifrit. Then the game cuts back to Alphinaud getting the news about Arenvald getting severely injured, but he puts this news aside to join the Scions meeting with the Sultana, where they figure out the towers are making primals by manipulating the people within to summon their gods for the good of Garlemald. Then Nanamo reveals that there are 7 of these lunar primals roaming around, but none of them are nearly as strong as Lunar Bahamut. So she asks the Scions to rest until the Alliance calls for them. So the Scions with Estinian go back to the Rising Stones, and this is where Cryo asks Estinian to join the Scions while she asks for Sharlayan's aid against the coming threat as an Eorzean emissary. Then she brings up that it's weird that Hydaelyn hasn't spoken to you since the end of the Dragonsong War, and she's hoping to find some answers about that in Sharlayan. Then she turns her attention back to Estinian to get his answer, and after an uncharacteristic speech, he agrees to join the Scions. After resting a bit, most of the Scions go to Alamigo to take part in the most recent Alliance meeting. At this meeting, the Eorzean Alliance gets all of the beastmen to agree to peace and join the fight against Garlemald, and you get the honor of renaming the Eorzean Alliance to the Grand Company of Eorzea. After the meeting, you, Alizé, Alphinaud, and G'raha go to Gridania to help Khan Sienna in a meeting with a Sharlayan envoy, which ends up being the twins' father, Forshanu. But unfortunately, this meeting goes wrong, with Forshanu stating that Sharlayan will not intervene between Eorzea and Garlemald. Following this, Alphinaud and Alizé speak up against their father, but he blows them off and disowns them. After that, he restates Sharlayan's position and leaves. The Scions are called to help the Grand Company of Eorzea to fight the Telophoroi at the Cartanu Flats. But before your group leaves Gridania, you run into Arenvald, who gives Alphinaud the news that he may never walk again, and asks him to realize how many things he's achieved and to stop overthinking. Then you meet the rest of the Scions at the Cartanu Flats. After meeting up with everyone, the Scions rush into battle together until they split up to defeat the lunar primals. After the battle comes to a close, everyone stares at the moon, wondering what comes next. Then the Scions return to the Rising Stones and agree that Sharlayan is hiding something. existing, and that should be their next destination. After this, the game cuts away to show Xenos has a new weapon and that his eyes are solely focused on you. Then the game moves back to the Scions, who figure out that the aether around Eorzea has significantly weakened, proving that the towers are sucking the aether out of the land. So they go back to the Rising Stones to inform their allies, but as you do, a mysterious figure shrouded by blinding light tells you that the fate of the source is in your hands. The Scions start their journey by heading towards Limsa Lominsa to get on a ship heading towards Old Sharlayan. On the ship, Hydaelyn speaks to you face to face, telling you that she no longer has the power to call you to her realm anymore, and explaining that when you finally understand what is at stake, she will honor the promise she made. Then she leaves, leaving you confused about the promise she's talking about. But you don't get a chance to think about it because you've arrived at Sharlayan. When the Scions step off the boat, they're greeted by Cryo using the excuse that they'll be her assistants, hiding the fact that they're the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. They split up to do their own things while Cryo gives you a tour of the city. After finishing your tour of the city, everyone meets in the Baldesion Annex, which will be your base of operations in Sharlayan. At this meeting, Cryo explains that there are two ways to gather information to stop Fandaniel and Xenos' forces, the Telophoroi. The first option is to investigate the change in Sharlayan and the bizarre behavior of the Forum, the 99 elected officials that make up the Sharlayan government. And the second option is to go to Thavnir to help an alchemist named Nadana to help her deal with a tower that has risen there and a lunar primal that came out of it. But Y'shtola thinks that both are just as important as the other, so everyone leaves it up to you to decide which issue to tackle first. You decide to investigate Sharlayan with Alphinaud, Alisaie, G'raha, Y'shtola, and Cryo first before going to Thavnir. But your combined research gets you nowhere until Alisaie notices that the Gleaners, the people who do the grunt work for the Sharlayan government, are bringing unusually large shipments to Labyrinthos, an underground Sharlayan complex that stores various animals and plant life from all over the world. So everyone except for G'raha goes to Labyrinthos to investigate. Your group gets to the lower levels of Labyrinthos after helping a gleaner named Erenvale, who tells you about an alternate way down. When you get to the lower level, you find a flower called Elpis that changes colors based on the emotions in the people near them. After this, your comrades find you and you all find Erenvale, who's on his way to a meeting with a Forum member, and your group follows him. In this meeting, you find out that Sharlayan was given an important task, and now that the final days are coming, they have to complete that task. After getting this information, you look for Cryo, who has gone missing. You end up finding her near the Elpis flowers, where she gives you one. Then she's possessed by Hydaelyn. She explains that her power is fading fast and that the flower will be your guide. After this, Forshanu finds your group and explains that the Forum has an issue with the presence of the Scions in Sharlayan, and that G'raha was caught reading books in the restricted section of the library. So all of you are brought before the Forum of Sharlayan to plead your case and to see if you can stay in the city. But before the Forum comes to a decision, G'raha reveals that he knows that 270 years ago that Sharlayan stopped preserving knowledge for the benefit of society, but reshaped society to preserve knowledge. Around the time they started researching the Ethereal Sea, one Forum member tries to say something but is stopped by an invisible force. After this, the Forum decides that the Scions can stay in Sharlayan on the condition that they stop investigating the Forum's actions. After this, you and the twins visit House Levier at the request of their mother, and they get new outfits. After this, you go to Thavnir with Estinian, Thancred, and Urianger. After looking around and meeting new people like the Fist Merchant Marcia, who helps you find the people you're looking for, your group arrives at a village called the Great Work, just as Varashan delivers a new set of dragon scales to the alchemists so they can continue working. Estinian finds this suspicious, but Varashan explains that they have an alliance with the dragon in Thavnir, so Estinian drops it. After this, you meet Nadana and you help her complete her talisman that can nullify tempering. So you and her get on a boat to approach the tower to the entrance, but just when you want to leave, she gets pulled into the tower and you chase after her, only to get there too late and you find out that Fandaniel is the one doing this. In your conversation with him, he explains that people within the towers aren't dead and that he was originally named Amon, an Allegan scientist who served King Xandi. Eventually, he was recruited into the Ascians, gaining the knowledge of the person he used to be, but felt like they were never a part of who he was. Then you get a vision of his life within the Allegan Empire. Then he escapes. So from this point forward, I'll be referring to this person as Amon. Afterwards, Varashan explains that you're invited to meet the ruler of Razatan, the satrap. In this meeting, the Scions find out that the satrap is just a figurehead for the real ruler. Vitra is the child of Midgard and the sibling of other first brood dragons like Raceverger and Tiamat. In this meeting, he explains that Varashan is just a puppet that houses his other eye so he can monitor the state of Razatan without scaring the people. Then he asks for the Scions to destroy the tower in Thavnir in exchange for as many warding talismans as they want. So you four go back to Sharlayan to discuss this plan with the rest of your comrades. The Scions decide to split into two teams. One team will ease the suffering of the people inside the tower, consisting of Graha, Urianger, Cryo, and Y'shtola, while the rest of the Scions will look for the core and destroy it, bringing down the tower. After this, they succeed in their plan and save the people inside. So the Scions have a meeting with Vitra where he thanks them for saving his people and tells them that he doesn't know anything about the final days. After this, the Scions go to get the warding talismans, but you stay behind to talk to Vitra, where he tells you to protect your friends no matter what. After this, you join your friends and decide to directly attack Garlemald to stop the towers at their source. So the Scions split up to bring this idea to their allies around the world. But before you leave, Nadana thanks all of you and explains the concept of Akasha after seeing the Elpis Tower. She tells the Scions that Akasha is the energy or essence influenced by feeling that cannot be controlled like Aether. After this, you go back to Sharlayan and the game cuts away to show us that Amon and Xenos are in Garlemald. Then the game goes back to the Scions where you talk to Montague, the friend of Alizé, Alphanode, and Cryo's respective grandfathers, where he explains that he can't discuss the duty of the Forum unless all 99 members agree to undo the spell placed upon every Forum member. After this, you and some of the Scions go to Limsa Lominsa to meet with Consena, Melvib, and Nanamo, where they ask the Scions to help the Isilbald contingent destroy the main tower in Garlemald and help the Garlean civilians, and they agree. After this, every Scion except for Cryo goes to Alamigo to meet the Isilbald contingent, which is made up of some of the best warriors and people from every nation the Scions have helped so far. When the Isilbald contingent gets to Garlemald, they quickly make a camp at a settlement they name Camp Broken Glass. Afterwards, you, Alizé, and Alphino go to the base of the First Legion with a Garlean soldier named Euless who was caught trying to steal your supplies. When you three get to the base, you try to negotiate with the leader of the First Legion, Lord Quintus, to get his soldiers and the civilians there some help, but due to his pride, he declines the offer. Then he puts shot callers on Alizé and Alphino to take them as hostages while they're at his base. In the meantime, while you help the Garleans, Dankrid contacts you and lets you know that the Isilbald contingent knows the situation you three are in, and he tells you to play along for a little longer. After returning to the base, Quintus tells you that he wants all of the Isilbald contingent's supplies and one airship, and that the twins will stay at his base until his demands are fulfilled. So you and Euless go to Camp Broken Glass to deliver this news, but soon after you get there, your allies rescue the twins. Then Lucia subdues Euless and his comrades by giving them the news that the rest of the Garlemald legions have requested aid from the Grand Company of Eorzea to deal with the towers. After getting this news, Quintus disbands the First Legion, ordering them to do whatever they want. Then he takes his own life. Following this, a giant scream comes from the Tower of Babel, which tempers everyone that doesn't have a warding talisman. In the middle of this chaos, Amon teleports you away from the battlefield and knocks you out. When you wake up, your soul is in another body sitting across from Xenos. In this conversation, Amon and Xenos explain that the Tower of Babel is connected to all of the towers around the world, absorbing their energy so they can free Zodiark and start the final days, and that they're tempering people to serve Garlemald by channeling their will through Varus's corpse, which they call Anima. After this, Xenos takes your body and challenges you to get back to Camp Broken Glass before he slaughters your friends, and you do. After getting your body back, you tell everyone what you learned. So the Scions enter the Tower of Babel and destroy Anima, stopping the towers around the world. But before they can celebrate, Amon and Xenos use the energy they collected to nearly break Zodiark's prison, but it isn't enough, so they go to the moon to break the last seal. However, as they leave, Hydaelyn shows up in Cryo's body and changes their course so they can't break the last seal immediately. So you and the Scions split up, with you going to the moon and them handling things in Garlemald. But before you get to the moon, I want you to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video and if you want to see more like it on top of the video essays I make as well. But with that being said, let's get back to the moon. When you get to the moon, you arrive at Mare Lantorum and meet the Watcher, Hydaelyn's creation that watches over the moon and Zodiark. They explain that the shades you see walking around are the remains of the Ascians that sacrificed themselves to summon Zodiark, and that if Zodiark is destroyed, their souls will be exterminated as well. So you go around getting rid of them until you run into a golden dog who leads you to a giant group of shades who begin to overwhelm you until Hyplodeus calls them off. You explain the situation to him and he tells you that he's on your side, but you're interrupted by the arrival of Amon and Xenos, who breaks the last seal. But at the last moment, Amon betrays Xenos and takes the power of Zodiark for himself. So with no other choice, you fight the Amon-controlled Zodiark and you win. But this is what Amon wanted you to do. He explains that by killing Zodiark, you have started to unweave reality and have begun the final days. You hear a strange voice and you get a vision of the world being consumed by darkness. After this, Xeno leaves to find another power for his last fight with you. Then you head back to Mare Lantorum, where Thancred, Y'shtola, and Urianger are waiting for you. This is where the Watcher explains that in the original final days, the Ascians' thoughts of despair gave rise to monsters through the Ascians' creation magic, and that the moon is a giant ship for the people of Etheirys, the world Final Fantasy XIV takes place on, just in case the final days cannot be stopped. After this, the Watcher leads your group to Argos, the golden dog you met earlier. Argos takes your group to meet the crew of this giant ship, the Loperites. After getting over their initial shock, your group talks to the leader of the Loperites, Livingway, who explains that Hydaelyn created them to escort the people from Etheirys to a new planet if the final days happen again. Then she asks your group's opinion on how prepared they are for the people of Etheirys to come to the moon. So this leads to a couple of fun moments, but you tell them that the ship and its facilities are practical but aren't ready for the variety of people that could come from Etheirys. So after getting this news, Urianger decides to stay on the moon to help the Loperites prepare in case things go wrong on Etheirys. But before your group leaves, the Watcher tells you to remember the name Elpis, and with that, you, Thancred, and Y'shtola go back to Sharlayan. This is where the Forum reveals its duty to everyone in Sharlayan. They explain that 270 years ago, their ancestors met Hydaelyn, and she warned them about the final days. Then they tell everyone they're building a ship to go to the moon, so with that, the Great Exodus will begin. And lastly, Forshanu will be leading this endeavor. The next day, the final days begin in Thavnir, and they request the aid of the Scions. Immediately after getting there, the Scions find out that the people's fears are turning them into these monsters called blasphemies. Then the Scions go to Venspati to deal with the strongest blasphemy on the island. After dealing with this blasphemy, they find out that there is no way to save the people who transform. Then they talk to Vitra, who says that he will do what he must to protect his people, and Estinian joins him in the sky. After this, the rest of you go to Razathan to calm the people, but in the middle of this chaos, the satrap is killed, causing many people to turn into blasphemies. Then Matzia reappears because a village named Palakistan needs help. So the Scions split up, with you, Alphinaud, and Alizé going to the village with Matzia. Upon reaching Palakistan, Matzia finds out that the couple who helped get his fishing business off the ground is missing, so we look for them. Unfortunately, we can't find them in time, but we save their baby. So you and the twins hold off the blasphemies while Matzia gets the baby back to the village. However, they get cornered, so he and the baby start falling to despair until Estinian and Vitra save them. Then Vitra calms down the baby and learns about the satrap's death. This inspires him to reveal himself to the people of Razatan and rule his kingdom openly. Following this, the forum led by Fortunu offers the people of Daphne passage to the moon and sanctuary in Charlian for the time being. Vitra accepts his proposal, saying that his people are free to choose whatever they want. After this, Nadana tells the Scions that she believes the final days and the blasphemies are using the power of Akasa, the energy influenced by emotion. After this, Vitra sets up a personal banquet to thank the Scions. At this dinner, the Scions don't know what to do next until you bring up Elpis and how the Watcher told you to remember that word. Then Graha recommends you go back to the first so you can ask Elidibus about the word Elpis, revealing that when you defeated the Ascian near the end of Shadowbringers, he trapped Elidibus within the White Ursite from the Crystal Tower on the first, slowly killing him, meaning that a small portion of his mind may still remain. So you go to the Crystal Tower on the first and call upon Elidibus. In your conversation with him, you explain everything that has happened and ask him about the name Elpis. He tells you that Elpis wasn't just a flower but a place, and that the original Amon, Hermes, was the leader of Elpis, and he was the reason why the Ascians found out about the final days and had enough time to create Zodiac. After this, Elidibus uses the last of his power to send you back in time to Elpis when Hermes was in charge to see if you can find the answers you need, and with this, Elidibus passes away. As soon as you arrive in Elpis, you meet a young Emetselk and Hyphlodais. You explain that you're looking for Hermes like they are, so you join them. You quickly find Hermes and one of his creations, Meteon. After this, everyone has a meeting when the main topic of discussion is Hermes joining the convocation. But Hermes is hesitant because if he joins, he will essentially be signing his predecessor's death warrant, because in Ascian society, most people don't die due to old age or conflict. They willingly enter the ethereal sea of their own choosing after fulfilling their life's purpose, and there is no higher honor than serving on the convocation of 14. This conversation disturbs Meteon, so you take her outside. In your small adventure with Meteon, you find out that she can feel the feelings of others, communicate directly through feelings, which is like telepathy, and she hasn't developed a personality or moral compass of her own yet, but it is clear she cares about Hermes. After this, your entire group follows Hermes doing his duties until you find Elpis flowers. Then Hermes tells you about the energy called Dynamis, and you realize it is the same thing as Akasa. So from this point forward, I will call this energy Dynamis. Then we find out Meteon can draw upon this energy as well, which explains why she is susceptible to others' emotions. After this, your group continues monitoring Hermes, and you begin to realize Hermes wouldn't start the final days on purpose. After this, you, Emetselk, and Hyphlodais leave Hermes to make his final decision. In your travels, your group runs into Vana, and she immediately figures out that you're from the future, so you explain everything to them. After this, Emetselk runs off, not being able to handle what you said, and Hyphlodais runs after him. So you and Vana investigate how Hermes and Meteon tie into the final days. You two find out that Hermes had released Meteon's sisters into space on a small island in the distance, so Vana summons Argos so you and her can travel to the island, and this explains why Argos helps you on the moon in the present. So Vana uses the Aether on this island to see what Hermes was doing. We find out that Hermes sent Meteon's sisters into space to see what other people and societies live for and if there is a meaning to life. You rejoin Emetselk and Hyphlodais to tell Hermes about the future. He believes you and guesses that Dynamis is the root cause of the final days, but he doesn't understand what is the source of the Dynamis, explaining that the negative emotions have to come from somewhere else. However, Meteon starts acting weird, getting blasted by a giant amount of negative emotion from the hive mind she shares with her sisters. After this, she runs away from all of you, begging you to stay away, but you eventually catch her. The hive mind takes over Meteon's body, explaining that the planets Meteon's sisters went to were devoid of life due to various reasons. This is when Emetselk points out that Hermes' question of what others live for is flawed, explaining that if Meteon's sisters couldn't find a planet with life on it, they would believe that life isn't worth living. On top of feeling all of the negative emotions organs these dead planets still have due to Dynamis. So Emet-Selch recommends they use Meteion to bring her sisters back and destroy her. But Hermes wants to hear her full report, so he takes her to Kitis Hyboria. So you, Emet-Selch, Hyplodeus, and Vana fight your way to Hermes and defeat him. After the battle, Hermes tries to wipe the memories of the last week from everyone's mind by suppressing their aether, while Meteion escapes, joining her sisters who have been overwhelmed by the despair they've seen throughout the universe. But then she proclaims that they will save everyone from suffering by ending all life within the universe. But before Hermes can finish his plan, you and Vana escape, meaning that Hyplodeus, Emet-Selch, and Hermes will forget about this week and you until they pass away and regain those memories upon death. After this, you part ways with Vana and you go back to the present while she does her best within the past, eventually becoming Hydaelyn. After this, you go to Garlemald to help the Scions, the Isilbald contingent, and the killed Garlean soldiers led by Eulis to fight off the blasphemies attacking people trying to get to the moon. After the battle ends, Fortunu offers the Scions a ride back to Camp Broken Glass. At the camp, Alphinaud makes a deal with his father to stop interfering in the Forum's plans. In exchange, the Forum will tell the Scions everything. After this, Urianger returns with some of the Loperids who have come down to Aetheris to help and learn about the world. Then everyone goes back to Sharlayan, where you tell them everything you learned about in Elpis. But you still need to find out where Meteion is and how to get there. Afterwards, the Scions have a meeting with the Forum where they hear a full explanation of their plan, but the ship that is supposed to carry people to the moon isn't fast enough and the Forum can't figure out how to improve it. So Alphinaud makes another deal with the Forum, saying that the Scions will improve the ship's speed, but in exchange, the Scions get to use the ship for their own reasons and the Forum lets them meet Hydaelyn. The Forum agrees to this, so Fortunu takes the Scions to meet the head engineer, Coco Denko. He tells the Scions that he needs supplies and materials from around the world, so Alphinaud calls upon their allies from all over the world to bring these things to Sharlayan. In the meantime, you help the people of Labyrinthos until your allies arrive. After seeing the massive impact the Scions have had on the world, Fortunu gives his full support to his children and the Scions. Then he invites the Scions to meet Hydaelyn. He explains that they have to dive deep within the ethereal sea by using the Atoscope to meet her, and they do. In their conversation with Hydaelyn, she explains that there are two paths: abandon Aetheris and find a new home, or defeat Meteion and the despair she holds. The Scions choose to fight the despair and save Aetheris, so Hydaelyn challenges them, promising to show them where Meteion is if they defeat her, but if they lose, they have to run away. But as always, the Scions win. Then Hydaelyn gives you a crystal containing a log of Meteion's travels through the universe. Then she gives you the Mother Crystal to power the ship so you can get to Meteion. And lastly, she gives you the power to weave reality, but explains that you can only use it a few times, so don't waste it. After that, with her work being finished, Venat passes away. Following this, the Scions get a good rest, then they use the Sharlayan spaceship Ragnarok to get to Ultima Thule, a collection of dead planets. But as you're traveling, Meteion attacks your ship and makes everyone pass out. When the Scions wake up, Thancred is missing and they're somehow able to breathe in this place. As you explore this area, Meteion appears to the Scions again, explaining that Thancred sacrificed himself so the rest of your group could breathe here, and is preventing Meteion and her sisters from destroying your physical form. After this, the Scions figure out that they have to confront the biggest form of despair in each area of Ultima Thule to move forward towards the real body of despair. But this requires that they sacrifice their bodies in the process, with Estinian becoming a wind to clear the way, Urianger and Y'shtola becoming a portal to teleport you, G'raha transforming into a crystal path to the last area, and lastly, Alizé and Alphinaud become a stairway of light, lifting you to the last platform, leaving you alone. When you get to the last platform, Meteion tries to make you give up, but instead, you use the power to weave reality to summon Emet-Selch and Hyplodeus. They help you summon a field of Elpis flowers, showing Meteion that even in Ultima Thule, which is a land filled with despair, despair, broken dreams, and so many souls wishing for death, the universe still has hope. This allows Meteion to break away from her sister's hive mind and the despair they've collected. And while this is happening, you summon your friends back to your side. Then Meteion begs you to end their song of oblivion and stop them. After this, Emet-Selch and Hythlodaeus pass away for the last time. Following this, the Scions enter the true form of Meteion's sisters, seeing some of the worst planets they visited as Meteion leads you towards the core. When you get to the core, the Scions meet the Endsinger, an amalgamation of Meteion's sisters, the souls begging for death, and the dynamis they've generated. The Endsinger overwhelms your comrades, so you send them away to fight it alone, until your best friend Xenos comes to help you, explaining that he made a deal with Cryo to help you if she gave him your location, and he ate the rest of the Mother Crystal to regain his Shinryu form. After this, you defeat the Endsinger while riding on Xenos' back. Then you reach out to Meteion, showing her that even if life is fleeting, it is still worth living, inspiring her to sing a song of hope that will use the power of the worlds lost to sorrow to create life once again, hoping that one day Hermes can see this and smile. After this, Meteion tries to lead you back to Ragnarok, but before that, you have your final duel with Xenos, and you defeat him for the final time. Unfortunately, you're on the verge of death, but the device you use to send your friends back to the ship falls near you and takes you back to Ragnarok. So you and the rest of the Scions go back to Aetheris. After a small time skip, we find out that the Scions will be disbanding on paper so people will stop relying on them so much, but will return if the problem is big enough. And that is the end of Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker, and the first saga of Final Fantasy XIV.
But that doesn't mean the story is over. After a short rest, you return to the Rising Stones and visit Tataru. During your conversation with her, she suggests that you put down the mantle of hero for the time being to explore your own interests, pointing you in the direction of Razatan, specifically the ruins beneath the Bounty. Then you head to Razatan, where you find a merchant causing a commotion when he refuses to give a begging orphan his treasure map that leads to the vaults of Azadal III, a former satrap of Razatan, and these ruins happen to be underneath the Bounty. However, before you can do anything, Estinian buys the map. Following this, you notice each other and discuss a few things, like the merchant and the orphan working together. Then Estinian mentions how he wants to help the people of Razatan like you, Alphinaud, and Arenvald did for Alamigo by finding the Mad King's treasure. So you decide to join Estinian on this quest. So you split up as he secures a ship for your trip, and you head to Sharlayan, where you recruit Grahatia, who has been wanting to go on an adventure with you, Ystrola, who joined you because of Azadal III's tale of going to another world, and she's researching that at the moment, and lastly Urianger, who joins to conduct research for the Labyriths on issues that they're having. Following this, all of you join Estinian and explore Azadal's legacy. However, upon reaching the end, Vitra appears to stop our group from opening a secret and reveals that he's been hiding a void gate that leads to the 13th, the shard consumed by darkness. Vitra explains that 5,000 years ago, the Allagan Empire attacked Mercidia and defeated Bahamut. It forced the people of Mercidia to summon the warring Triad Primals, prompting Emperor Xandi to forge a covenant with the Cloud of Darkness, but the Voidsent was slowly gaining ground. So this led Vitra's older sister, who raised him, Ashdaya, to fly inside of the Void Gate and end this war once and for all. But unfortunately, the gate closed behind her, and she's been lost ever since. He goes on to explain that he found the small void gate long before Razatan was founded, and entered once with a sacralum the size of Varashan to call for his sister, but she didn't answer, and he had to leave because the Voidsent were trying to enter the source through the gate, forcing Vitra to seal the portal to protect his people. Then the game cuts to a scene of a knight in black and 4 others in the void discussing how you defeated the Cloud of Darkness and how they plan to start a war to save the 13th. Following this, Graha and Urianger go back to Sharlayan, and everyone else heads back to Razatan, where you and Estinian help Vitra form a plan to use Azadal III's treasure to bring financial prosperity back to his people and start an an orphanage for the children left parentless due to the final days. Later on, Y'shtola calls you, Estinian, and Vitra to explain that she believes that the key to finding a way to travel between the source and its reflections is by figuring out why there is such a thin boundary separating the source and the void to the point where planar fissures appear, allowing natural travel between the two. And she wants to figure this out by using the Void Gate in Azadar III's vault. But Vitra doesn't want to put his people at risk because they lost the knowledge of how to expand the Void Gate, so they can't even get through. So you and Y'shtola find a way to expand a Void Gate by using it at Atmos as you look through the restricted section of the old Charlian Nunemenon and recruit help of the alchemists of the Great Work to see if this is possible. This leads you, Y'shtola, Estinian, Vitra, and Nadana back to Azadar III's vault. This is where Y'shtola conducts an experiment and proves that the warding scales can repel the corruption of darkness for long-term journeys in the void, but still need to be slightly modified. So Nadana heads back to the Great Work to start construction on an artificial Atmos to expand the gate, while Y'shtola sends a request to Garland Ironworks to augment the warding scales. So you go off to do your own thing until you return to Razatan. Then you, Y'shtola, Estinian, and Vitra head to the Great Work where the artificial Atmos is completed, and Vitra gets some encouragement from his subjects to go save his sister. So with that, he approves your journey into the void and decides to join you. After this, the game moves back to our heroes where Sid, Biggs, Wedge, and Nero personally deliver the improved warding skills. Vitra gets a new adult-sized Varashan to help you in battle, while in the 13th, the Radiant Host, Razatan's military, promises to not let a single void sent through while the gate is open. Then Y'shtola informs you that Urianger visited Razatan and left a gift from the Loporits for you, the crystal that showed the way to Meteion, and it still has a great amount of light within, and since you're heading to the void, she believes that it could help, and because you're Hydaelyn's champion, you should carry it. Following this, your group head to Azadar III's vault where the artificial Atmos works correctly. So our heroes step through, making their way through the frail court of Troya, slaying void sent left and right, until they run into Scarmillion, the archfiend of Earth, who works under Golbez and somehow knows that a void gate was open. Then you seemingly defeat him. Then your group looks around the castle talking to various void sent until you encounter the void sent Xenos summoned as a Reaper. Then Hydaelyn's crystal somewhat purifies this void sent, returning it to its true form. Then the void sent reveals that she didn't help Xenos willingly and has no ill will against you. Following this, Y'shtola agrees with the void sent to pay her Aether for answering your group's question. Then your group follows the void sent as she talks about how the Contra Memoria War led to the 13th being flooded with darkness, leading to every living being eventually becoming a void sent. Y'shtola interrupts to make the comparison between Sin Eaters and void sent essentially being the same thing except for the element used to create them, in addition to asking the void sent why she is different from the others. Then the void sent explains that the darkness touched her when she was still in her mother's womb, making her only part void sent. And the side effect of this is that she stopped aging when she became an adult. After some more discussion, Y'shtola decides to call the void sent Zero, and the void sent agrees. So from this point forward, the void sent will be called Zero. After this, the topic of Azdaia is brought up to Zero, but someone in the distance is listening. So everyone goes back inside to the throne room where Y'shtola pays Zero with Aether, but Scarmillion interrupts by attacking him. This leads Y'shtola to realize that back in the first, certain places wouldn't allow new life to flourish, so darkness would have the opposite effect, not allowing things to die. Following this, our heroes get locked in a stalemate with Scarmillion until Y'shtola convinces Zero to help them by explaining to Zero that she now owes them because Y'shtola gave her a name. So Zero uses her Memoria ability to seal Aether in crystal, allowing your group to defeat Scarmillion. After the fight, you pick up Scarmillion's crystal and see a flashback of Golbez feeding some of Asdaia's Aether to the 4 void sent that would become archfiends. and states that the dragon would be used for other purposes. After the flashback, you tell everyone what you saw, then Zero explains that she is the only one left who can use Memoria because she's part human, but the ability was more common during the Contra Memoria War. Following this, you get information about Golbez and how the Archfiends operate. Then you relay this information to everyone else. So Vitra convinces Zero to join your quest, promising her more Aether. After this, Zero takes our heroes to her domain, a sanctuary where refugees and Golbez army deserters live. But unfortunately, there is a Voidsent working for Golbez watching from a distance. Then you arrive at Zero's domain, where you ask around about Golbez, leading you to a Voidsent named Serato, who warned you about Barbaricia, the Archfiend of Wind. After this, the game cuts to Golbez's spy informing his master and the Archfiends about our heroes defeating Scarmillion with Zero's Memoria ability. So Barbaricia volunteers to deal with our heroes in exchange for the rest of Asdia's Aether, then she leaves. Then we cut back to Zero's domain, where Barbaricia confronts our heroes and confirms Asdia is still alive, and then she leaves. Following this, your group invades Barbaricia's domain, but you split up, leaving your comrades to deal with her minions while you face Barbaricia alone. After defeating the Archfiend, Zero swoops in to seal her, but passes out after using so much Aether. After seeing that Zero won't wake up anytime soon, our heroes decide to take her back to the source with them. After returning to Razatan, Y'shtola explains that in the 13th there is no ambient Aether because of the excessive amounts of darkness, but in the source there is, meaning that Zero will recover and wake up by simply being here. Following this, everyone splits up to do their own thing until Nadana tells them that Zero has awakened. In the following scene, our group figures out that Zero can eat food since she's only part Voidsent, meaning that she doesn't have to take Aether from people anymore. Following this, you and Vitra show Zero around Razatan, and she starts to take an interest in how other people live, what a friend is, and why did Xenos fly through space to help you. This leads to a conversation later on with everyone, where she talks about how the Asians taught the people of the 13th how to summon primals, but heroes with the power of Memoria rose to defeat them. However, these heroes were corrupted by the darkness they sealed, becoming Voidsent themselves, spreading the darkness to create monsters and wage new wars, leading to the flood of darkness. After this, Y'shtola explains the source, its 13 reflections, and recaps the Scion's adventure in the first, to tell Zero that there is still a chance to save her world, alluding to the fact that they want to help save the 13th, and Zero says that she doesn't care about saving her world, but she's lying. Then the game cuts to the Void, where Golbez gives the Fiend of Fire Rubicante permission to enact a plan that involves the Fiend of Water, Kanazo. Then some time passes. When you return to Razatan, everyone is ready to return to the Void. You go to find Zero. When you find her, she is still thinking about why Xenos treated you differently than everyone else, but puts that aside to join you, Vitra, Y'shtola, and Estinian as our heroes head back to the Void. However, Vitra stops everyone, explaining that he felt Asdia's presence in the north, taking your group to Garlemald, where you reunite with Alphanode and Alizé, who have been here helping the Garleans since you dealt with the final days. Then Y'shtola recaps the events of your current adventure to the twins, and Vitra follows up by explaining why you're here now. So the twins tell your group that they've had to deal with some stronger than normal Voidsent over the last few days, and believe that they're coming from an isolated, abandoned mountain village, Lapis Manalis, that used to home an order of Reapers. But it is just too difficult to simply walk or fly there. So everyone goes to Camp Broken Glass to see if Ulyss can help, and he recommends that you find someone who can fix the magic tech snowcraft that just broke down. Alizé does know someone, so you and Zero join her to find this person. Along the way, Zero asks Alizé what does she gain from helping the Garleans. Alizé explains that she didn't gain anything and that she simply followed her heart, leaving Zero confused. After this, your trio finds someone to fix the snowcraft, so Vitra, Y'shtola, and Estinian leave with the mechanic to help. As you help Alizé patrol and deal with Voidsent, the game cuts to Zero helping Alphanode deliver supplies to the Garleans at Terratum, and has a conversation with Euless that allows her to understand the people on the source a little more. But the moment of calm is interrupted by a large group of Voidsent attacking. So you and the twins go off to help your allies at the Snowcraft, as Zero stays behind with Euless because this wasn't a part of the deal they made. But seeing Euless' determination to save his men who were ambushed by Voidsent, knowing that he most likely won't make a difference, spurs Zero into action, and she goes off to save Euless' men, while he stays behind. Zero saves the soldiers but quickly gets overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of Voidsent and passes out. Then the game cuts to a flashback of Zero during the Contra Memoria War, where she failed to protect a village from a group of corrupted heroes. Then the game cuts back to the present, where Zero has been saved by you and the twins, leading to Zero deciding to help our heroes explore Lapis Manilis because she wants to help them and that they don't have to pay her back. Zero basically explains that by interacting with everyone, they've lit a fire in her and reawakened her emotions. At the end of Lapis Manilis, our heroes find the Void Gate and Kanazo jumps out, but after a tough fight, our heroes defeat him. But before Kanazo goes to the Ethereal Sea, he explains that the presence Vitra felt was Esdaya's eye, and with that, Kanazo passes away with the Void Gate closing upon his death. After this, the twins stay in Garlemald while your group returns to Razatan. Unfortunately, upon our heroes' return, a giant pillar of Aether erupts, leading our group to split up, with Vitra helping citizens in need, Y'shtola and Estinian checking on Vitra's Void Gate but finding it destroyed, informing you that Kanazo with Esdaya's eye was a distraction to do this, leaving you and Zero to confront the Archfiend of Fire, Rubicante. After defeating Rubicante, he tells you about Golbez's plan, but as he talks, you see a flashback referring to the information he is telling you. This flashback shows that Golbez's plan was to abandon the 13th and conquer the Source, to give the residents of the Void a chance to start over and finally die. After the flashback, Rubicante tells you that Golbez and Esdaya are on the moon in the 13th, hoping that by meeting you, Golbez will follow his true desire as he passes away. Then you and Zero regroup with everyone at the palace, informing them about everything Rubicante told you. So everyone splits up to do their own thing as Y'shtola heads back to Charlian to find a way to the Void. Then the game cuts to the 13th, showing Esdaya imprisoned as Golbez claims that his suffering will end soon. After that, some time passes and our adventure continues when Y'shtola, with Urianger's help, figures out that opening a Void Gate in the Source will lead to the exact same location they want to travel to in the opposing shard. This means Y'shtola will create a Void Gate on the moon big enough to allow dragons like Vitra and Esdaya to pass through without issue. Along the way, our group faced some challenges that involved calling in a few favors, in addition to making a few deals with the nations of Razatan, Charlian, and Garlemald. During this time, Zero finally realizes why no one trusts one another in the Void after talking to Thancred and Euless, regretting how she turned down some of the last heroes to join forces, sealing the fate of the 13th. But this allows her to realize that she has formed bonds with her new comrades. After finishing everything with Garlemald, Vitra gives you Esdaya's eye for the time being as he heads back to Razatan to bring his real body to the moon. Then our heroes go to the moon after setting everything up and getting the proper permission. You, Y'shtola, Zero, Estinian, and Vitra go to the moon and straight into the Void, while Urianger and the Loperites defend the gate. When your group arrives, they find Esdaya in Golbez's lair within the chasm on the moon, and you return her eye, but unfortunately the chains that bind her are made of Golbez's will, meaning that you'll have to defeat him to free her. So our heroes look for Golbez and come across a memoria that shows you a flashback of Golbez and a man named Durante asking Zero to join them during the Contra Memoria War. But Zero rejects them, so the two men continue towards a kingdom named Barren. Then the game cuts back to the present where you explain what you saw, meaning that the Memoria you picked up used to be Durante. Then Golbez appears, freeing Azdaia from her prison, allowing the darkness to corrupt the dragon, and transforms her into a void scent Golbez can control. In this chaos, you're separated as they deal with the lesser void scent while you fight Golbez and Azdaia. But upon defeating the duo, Golbez throws Azdaia into the chasm of darkness and left over Aether from Zodiac's defeat below his lair, transforming Azdaia into Zeromus, who only wants to go home to the source. Golbez's plan is to use this monster's desire to go home to break the boundary between the source and the 13th, but the darkness surrounding Zeromus shields them from our group's attacks, forcing our heroes to retreat. When our group is back at Razatan, Zero reminds Vitra that when Void Sent are defeated in the 13th, they don't die. The Aether simply scatters, meaning that if they can defeat Zeromus, they can remind Azdaia about who she is. Vitra's call could wake her up and allow her to come back. Then Y'shtola tells everyone to rest while she develops a plan to use light from the first to weaken Zeromus, so you can defeat it. After this, you go off to do other things, but when you return, Y'shtola has found a way to transfer light from the first to the 13th. She explains that she contacted Sid to create Aether transmitters that will let them direct the flow of light as they wish, basically creating their own Aether current. After hearing this explanation, you leave for the first, but Zero wants to see the world the Scions brought back from the brink, so she comes along as well. After reaching the first, you send Baal Luck to operate the Crystal Tower while you, Zero, and Reen travel all over the first to get permission to use the Crystal Tower from various settlements across the world. At the end of our short journey, our trio heads to the Flood of Light to start the Aether current, and it works, but this inspires Zero to absorb some light herself to see if she can command the power of light once again, but she passes out. Then Zero explains to you and Reen that after seeing the first, she hopes that her world could be saved as well, leading Reen to help Zero absorb more light, giving the Reaper the ability to use light once again. After finishing your business on the first, your duo returns to the source to regroup with Vitra, Y'shtola, and Estinian, immediately going back to the void. After this, Y'shtola activates the last set of transmitters, piercing the veil of darkness. This allows our heroes to enter the lunar subterranean, but as they make their way through, a Memoria shows our heroes the fall of the Barren Kingdom, and upon reaching the end of this memory, it reveals that the original Golbez was corrupted by darkness, so Durante killed him and took Golbez's armor to honor his dead comrade. This means that the current Golbez is actually Durante, but for clarity, I'll continue calling him Golbez. Following this, Golbez appears and reveals that he was manipulated by the Ascian Igeorm into killing the Watcher of the 13th, opening the floodgates for darkness to consume the 13th. Following this, your group splits up with your allies fighting Golbez and imitations of the Archfiends as you dive below to confront Zeromus. And after an extremely tough fight, you defeat the Void Scent, but it immediately regenerates. However, your allies and Golbez appears to help defeat the monster. Then the game cuts to whatever happened after your friends beat Golbez. Zero convinces Golbez to use the regret and pain he has over the things he's done in the past to atone, by joining her quest to save the 13th instead of leading everyone to death. Also, your other allies offer to help save the Void at some point down the line if Golbez helps them now. Then the game cuts back to the present where our heroes get overwhelmed, but this is where the light within Zero reaches its apex, allowing her to regain her original power and transforms the Reaper into a paladin, allowing Zero to vanquish Zeromus and free Azdaia. Unfortunately, Azdaia doesn't have a body anymore, so Vitra gives his sister one of his eyes to give her a body. Then Golbez accepts Zero's offer to help her save the 13th. Following this, a few things happen. Y'shtola gives Zero a familiar that will act as a beacon to her when you and your allies return to the 13th. Zero gives you Zeromus's Memoria to give to Reen, hoping that it will serve as an initial step to create a balance between the 1st and 13th. You give Zero the Archfiend's Memoria, and finally everyone says farewell to Zero, promising to come back one day. Following this, Y'shtola, Estinian, and Vitra return to Razatan Razatan, while you return to the first to deliver Zeromus' Memoria to help balance out the light within the first and Y'shtola spirit vessel so your allies in the first can control the tower to bring darkness into the shard. After this, you say your farewells to Reen, Lena, and Beoluk, but Gaia appears, saying that you can count on her when it comes to dealing with darkness. Side note here, Gaia is one of the main characters in the Eden Raid storyline, and her appearance in the MSQ will likely lead to a bigger role in an expansion down the line, like G'raha appearing in the Crystal Tower before returning in Shadowbringers. If you want to hear Gaia's story, I have a video linked in the description. But back to the story. After this, you say bye to your friends in the first, then you return to Razatan, where Vitra is hosting a party for everyone in Razatan who helped him be reunited with his sister. After the celebration, our heroes go their separate ways. Then the game cuts to Cryo reading a letter that was addressed to her late grandfather from the nation of Tulialal, located in the New World, that mentions investigating the City of Gold. In addition to this, she finds a strange earring as well. After this, some time passes until you are contacted by the students of Baldesion to meet them at Old Charlian. You're greeted by G'raha and Cryo, who inform you that Erenvale requested to meet you after cutting his big expedition short. So your trio meets Erenvale, who introduces you to a childhood friend of his that he told about the Scions, Wuk-Lamat, a claimant to the throne of Tulialal and one of the adopted children of its current ruler. She wants you to help her win the right of succession in a contest that will determine the next ruler of Taral, even mentioning that the City of Gold may be a part of the contest, which catches Cryo's and your attention. So Wuk-Lamat suggests that you go on a hunt together to get better acquainted, and Erenvale recommends the Isle of Ham because some of the beasts there are going savage because of an unknown predator. So everyone goes to the isle except Cryo, who has to prepare something but promises to be right behind you. After this, your group heads to the Isle of Ham and swiftly deals with the beast, but one gets back up to launch a sneak attack, but everyone is saved by Cryo, who takes down the monster by using Pictomancy. Cryo goes on to explain that she became a Pictomancer so she wouldn't be left behind like she was at the end of Endwalker. Then she goes on to explain that she has an interest in Taral because of the letter addressed to her grandfather, and after showing the letter to Wuk-Lamat, we find out a few things. The letter is apparently from Glu Jaja, the Dawn Servant, the ruler of Taral. Jaja didn't write this letter himself, but it has a genuine signature, so he could have asked someone to write it for him. Later on during dinner, Wuk-Lamat gives you, Cryo, and G'raha a brief history lesson on Taral and explains that she has to become the Dawn Servant so that one of her three siblings doesn't become king, because the sibling in question would use Garlemald's fall as an opportunity to conquer other nations. After hearing this, you take some time to consider Wuk-Lamat's offer. This is where you and G'raha run into the twins, who are still looking into ways to help Garlemald foster relations with other nations, and you go on to explain your current situation. After hearing about Taral and Wuk-Lamat, they seem interested, then they go off to do their own thing. After mulling things over with G'raha, you make your decision as Thancred watches you from a distance. G'raha leaves to do something, so you head to the Baldesion Annex, where Wuk-Lamat and Cryo await. At the Annex, you agree to help Wuk-Lamat. Following this, the twins and G'raha arrive, and the twins offer Wuk-Lamat their help, hoping that they can join her and learn about Tulialal so they can find ways to help Garlemald move forward, and Wuk-Lamat agrees. After this, G'raha encourages Cryo to follow her heart and promises to look after the students of Baldesion while she is gone. So Cryo officially joins Wuk-Lamat as well. Side note here, Wuk-Lamat can have several people join her quest to become the Dawn Servant, and currently has you, Cryo, Alphanode, Alizé, and Erenvale, meaning that there are 2 more people who could join her during the events of Dawntrail. Then the game cuts to Estinian heading towards the New World as well. After this, the game moves over to Yorianje and Thancred, who seem to be working for one of Wuk-Lamat's siblings, and they leave to get on a ship for Taral. Lastly, the game cuts back to you thinking about Hades' final words. words, mentioning the golden cities of the New World, and with that, you are ready for Dawntrail. If you enjoyed this video, like, comment, and subscribe with notifications turned on, because I will be doing a separate Dawntrail recap video after the game releases. But with that being said, it's been Skips and I'm out.